Hello and welcome to Reach and Reflect, a podcast where we interview guests from both traditional and alternative life paths with the aim of figuring out, for the benefit of our audience, where they find fulfillment and meaning. In spite of being raised in a very low-income household by parents with a 4th and 6th grade education, dedication, grit, and infectiously exuberant passion has led Josh Mendoza to get into Stanford before truly accomplishing his childhood dreams at the age of 27. However, that's not the most interesting thing about him. Josh is also dedicated to giving back and founded a nonprofit focused on mentoring underprivileged youth to provide them easier access to a path he blazed. This did not come easily, and he overcame material struggle when living out of his car for 3 years, and today is challenged by both perfectionism and being altruistic almost to a fault. We dive into his story with the aim of providing you with the wisdom he's gained. While this episode does not follow the typical format as much as other episodes, letting the conversation flow as it did felt like the right thing to do at the time. As always, we ask our audience to check in with how well this guest resonates with them. Resonance may be a sign that your life path or purpose is along the same lines as our guests. Thank you, and if you enjoy this episode, please leave a rating or review. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Derek. Really appreciate it. This is awesome.
My pleasure, man. I've been really looking forward to having you on, especially having talked to your colleague and our mutual friend, Alejandro. But before we dive in, I want to just take a moment to introduce the concept of the podcast to the audience. So this is Reach and Reflect. It's a podcast about meaning and fulfillment. And in order to get at these deep questions, what we're going to do is interview people who have achieved a respectable position in the domain of their choosing, dive into their life story and figure out where they're finding their fulfillment, whether they are, where they're finding it, and how other people may approach finding it in their lives.
Okay.
It's a podcast focused on authenticity and really explaining not just the highlights of your life, but the lowlights as well, so we can help people who might be in similar situations move through them better than they might otherwise. And today, our guest is Joshua Mendoza. He is the executive director of a nonprofit called Destined for X, which helps underprivileged children move through life better. He also just got hired at Apple.
Woo! Excited about that.
Yeah. And I will let him give his own brief bio. You know, how old are you? Where are you from? What are you doing?
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Derek. So like you mentioned, name's Josh Mendoza, currently 26 years old. I've lived in the Bay Area now for about 9 years, but really most of my life I've grown up in SoCal, a little town called Palmdale, about an hour north of LA, still in LA County. I think from a very young age, going a little bit into my family, so neither of my parents went to college. They didn't have a high school education even. Both of them, barely finished, 4th, 6th grade, respectively. So for me, when I was young, seeing all of the struggles that my parents went through to go, to come from Mexico to the United States and really, do the best for my family, to give me, really, because I was the only kid, like me, the best life that they could. It was challenging for them because they didn't have that, solid education background. So they always pushed for, me to focus on my studies. And it really got ingrained into me at a very early age that they didn't really even have to push me. Like I saw, like I knew what I wanted to do with my life at a very early age. And I just went for it. And a good example of that is when I was like in 10th or 11th grade, I got like my first iPhone. But even before that, just even a little iPod Touch or iPod Shuffle. And I was like, this is amazing. Like the people that came up with this product are just like the attention to detail is like phenomenal. Like the user experience is great. Like I actually love using this piece of technology. And so when I was in 11th grade, I remember doing a presentation to one of my classes. And in it, I remember distinctly saying, one day I will work for Apple and I will be designing, iPhones or something there. And it's really surreal. And the timing of you inviting me on this podcast is just perfect because 2 weeks ago, I started my first day at Apple as a product design engineer. And I'm just like, it still blows me away. And, I was crying when I got the offer, back then, a couple weeks ago, because it was like, this is it, right? Like it took me 10 years to achieve that goal, that dream, but I did it. And it was a huge moment for my family because when I called my mom and my dad, like I was crying, they were crying because it's like, oh my God, like, in such a short span of time, generation wise, my parents having zero education or formal education aside from, elementary school and middle school, to me working at, one of the best companies in the world as an engineer, it was just like surreal and just feeling so blessed. Right. And I can't put it any other way. But and I'm sure we'll get into this later in the interview, but, that's just very high level, kind of like where my family came from, where I came from. And, there's lots of stuff in between too. And, stuff that I've learned and mistakes that I've made and, things that I reflect and, even now, like as I'm here, 26 years old standing in front of you, I think, what is the next, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of my life? Because this is it for now, but it's not it for my entire life. But happy to answer, other questions. Don't want to go on too long answering this question.
No, that's great. That's a great summary of what already is an extremely inspiring story to me, right? Like that's you set a goal, you're achieving it, you're living the dream, the American dream almost. It sounds like, right? For immigrants to come in with next to zero education, and then now you to be at one of the top companies in the world. As you had so aimed, which is also absolutely crazy. So anyway, but we'll dive into detail into that in just a minute. So I want to go over, well, first of all, so we've talked about Apple. I also want to really quickly get an overview of Destined for X out there for people, and then we'll head from there into the origin story, or your origin story, sorry, and then move on.
Sure. So perfect segue. So it wasn't just like high school and Apple. A lot of stuff happened in between, and Destined for X and Microsoft and all of that stuff really do tie together. So ever since I was, and really I think it was high school that was really formative for me, that I realized that I had, even in high school, like, coming from a low-income, underprivileged family, I had a lot of privileges because the high school that I went to, or, even before that, when I was in middle school, one of my teachers said, "Hey, Josh," and her name was Mrs. Hudson, now Mrs. Vanderzee, so shout out to you if you're watching this. She said, "There's this new school opening up in the neighboring city in Lancaster, and you can actually take college classes while you're simultaneously in high school. And you don't have to pay tuition, books, or anything." Like the Gates Foundation at the time, and Ford and Kellogg, and I believe a few other companies were, giving grants to the school to get started. And I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. Because I knew, again, very early on that I wanted to, get a higher education. So I applied to the school, got accepted into it. And, at the end of those 4 years in high school, graduated not just with a high school diploma, but also with my associate's degree at no cost to my family. So again, like very early on, I realized, like, yes, my family hasn't had that much, but I'm blessed to have this opportunity. How can I help other students at my high school, other people, around the world even? And so when I was like a junior, senior in high school, I would talk to sophomores and freshmen and act as an ambassador, because you can imagine going from middle school to high school is a big enough shock. Now imagine a middle schooler going from, 7th grade into a college classroom, right, with real college students and a real college professor. It can be a bit of a shock. And just encouraging them, like, it's fine, like you can do it, like you're like, there's nothing wrong with you being so young and being in this space. Like, own that and like realize that you do have that potential. And talk to them about applying to scholarships and everything, because I think a lot of students at the time thought, oh well, I'll do that when I'm like a junior or a senior. It's like no, like do it when you're like a freshman, a sophomore. Like, again, just like own that you are a human being and you're incredible and you're amazing and you do amazing things. Like, there are people out there that can see that in you, right? And you just have to share that story and craft that story about yourself. So, and when I was at Stanford, I would go back to my high school and kind of share, this is what college is like, this is what opportunities are there, like this is why you should go to college, this is why you should like apply to scholarships, right? And just like give them a good sense of like, because your counselors will tell you this, your parents will tell you this, your teachers will tell you this, but it means so much more coming from someone who's only like a year or 2 or 3 like older than you, because it's like, oh wow, like I can see myself in their shoes, not that far out in the future. So when I graduated from Stanford and started working at Microsoft, aside from like the initial shock of like, oh my God, like, this is like one of the top companies that I'm working for. And when I first saw my first paycheck, I almost started crying, because I was like, this is more than twice what my parents make combined. And that was, it was this moment of like, again, just feeling very blessed, but also like guilty in a way. And I say guilty because it's almost like I feel like, not that I didn't deserve it, but it wasn't that I solely deserved it, because there were so many people that helped me get to that stage in my life that again, I felt like I have this education, I have this privilege of working at this really big, powerful company. Like, what do I do with this? Because I could just take all of this in this big paycheck and just focus on me, right? Like, go live in a nice apartment, go get a big car, go get like, all these nice things. And, I did do some of that, but then I realized, wait, I'm living in a really nice apartment where I'm paying $2,800 a month for rent. I have like a really nice car. I have all this really nice furniture. I have like a little, like creme brulee blowtorch thing, like, like all this stuff, which, I thought would like make me happy. Right. The big, 4K TV, and, it was nice, but it faded very quickly, like that initial excitement. And I was very depressed, that first year when I was working, not because of Microsoft, but just, of this sudden, like, oh my God, I'm making money, like what can I do with it? And then I realized, like, no, like, Josh, you've done this your whole life. Like, just because you have more money doesn't mean that you focus on yourself. Like, you've always been the person to kind of go back to like go back and like help other students and like, kind of like, help, pull people up. Just keep doing that. Right. And so when I was at Microsoft about a year and a half in, not even a year and a half in, but, I would volunteer for, sessions where students would come in from local high schools or, even as far from New Zealand, just to get a sense of, these students wanted to know, like, what's it like to work in a tech company? What's it like to work in Silicon Valley? What's it like to work at a Microsoft or a Google or a Facebook? And the one thing about those programs when I volunteered that, stood out to me was that, and I recall this one moment that was so vivid. I was talking to a classroom of auditorium of like 50 people, 50 students. And they all seemed really excited. Like, they were asking me questions like, what's it like to be an engineer at Microsoft? Like how did you get here? Like, what school did you go to? Like, tell us about your family. Like, and at the end I was like, oh my God, you guys have so many questions. Like, this is awesome. Like, here's my business card. And I only had 5 business cards at the time. And so I said, like, I mean, I can only give this to 5 of you, but of course you can share my information with, your friends and family, whatever, like, I don't mind. And, this group of kids lined up and, I looked each of them in the eye and I said, do you promise to email me with a question? And they were like, yeah. And none of them did. And I was like, no, like, this is such an awesome opportunity, not because it's me, but because like any time you have the opportunity to like, network with a professional in a field that you might even have the slightest inclination of maybe being in, like, you take it, right? And so I was so stunned, like I literally was there, like, any question you have, because I've literally been in your shoes, like, 10 years ago or whatnot. Like, I know that struggle. I know what it's like to be there. I know what it's like to like not know about the FAFSA and have to figure it out, and like financial aid, and like, do I do a public university or a private university, or like, like, there's a lot of questions, right? That one has at that age. And so to stark contrast to that, a couple of months later, I volunteered for another session, and it was the complete opposite. It was a group of students led by Andrew Patterson, who, shout out to you if you're watching, who came from New Zealand and brought, I think it was like 8 students. all, very low income, underrepresented. And they came with questions, and they gave me a thank you card, and they gave me a little gift of like, a little kiwi, pendant for like, my shirt. And like, they connected with me on LinkedIn afterwards, and they asked me tons of questions. And I was just like, this is literally like a very similar group of students, but they just did everything right. Right. And I still like message some of them, and some of them still message me like, to this day, like 2-3 years later. And I went up to Andrew Patterson after, that session. I said, what you're doing is incredible. Like, this is the most prepared group of students that I've ever talked to. I really want to do something similar to that. And I'll never forget what he told me. He's like, yeah, just go do it. And and that was such a huge moment for me, because I was like, yeah, why don't I just go do it? So that same night, I went back home after work, and I launched, and for me, I'm very frugal. So I went on Squarespace. I got a free trial. I made a quick little mock-up website, and I was like, what do I call this thing? Because I really wanted to formalize, all of the giving back and paying it forward that I was doing it. Because back then it was just me, going to high schools or going, doing talks or whatnot. I wanted to have a team. I wanted to have a name. And I thought like, oh, okay, like, young entrepreneurs of Silicon Valley, or, young tech business people, like what do I call this thing? And, I started to think and, reach and reflect on, my own journey. And I was like, my goals have changed so much in the past several years. Something stayed constant, but, there's always been that X that I'm chasing after, right? And I always feel like I'm just destined for that X, right? And that X can change, 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 20 years from now. But it's that journey, right, that I think that we should celebrate more, not necessarily what that X is, right? It's all the things that you learn, the skills you develop, like the people that you meet, the people that help you out. So that's when I decided, okay, let's call this Destined for X. And it's a little bit weird, but you kind of have to explain it sometimes. But I think it really encompasses like what I wanted to do with this nonprofit. So, did a quick Squarespace trial, set up a website, posted it on Facebook. Like, all I had was like a name. I didn't even have like a 501c3 yet. I didn't even know, like, how do I even get a 501c3 nonprofit status with the IRS? Didn't have a team, didn't have funding, didn't have any tours set up. And so my idea at the time was to bring 8 students, similar to Andrew Patterson's program, to Silicon Valley from throughout California, pay for their housing, transportation, lodging, and take them on tours of like the Tesla factory, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, like, and just show them like, that I did it, like you can do it. Like, there's all of these people, all of my friends, colleagues that also came from similar backgrounds who, they didn't have that much, but they knew what that X was for them, and they just went for it, right? And so within that time frame to the time we had the students on the ground was 4 months. So in 4 months, while I'm working full time as an engineer at Microsoft, had to like go to schools and say, hey, we're doing this, like apply and get funding and find housing and put it all together. And it was just 3 people, Nancy, Pham, Jason Basswell, and myself, and we just made it happen. And so, from there, it's grown over the years. And now, like you mentioned, our mutual friend, Alejandro Perez, who's now our CFO, we now have a team of, 7 people. And this year we're bringing 26 students to Silicon Valley. So, and again, paying for all lodging, housing, everything, food. So it's grown over the years, and it's really exciting because the students, they come and they're like, I don't really know what to expect, right? But they leave, and without fail, every single year there's been at least one student that cries, just because the environment that we create isn't necessarily like, and even though we focus on Silicon Valley and we're based in Silicon Valley and we do tours in Silicon Valley, it's more about you and your journey, not, yes, Amy, you should work at Facebook because you're interested in software engineering, and these are all the things that you do if you want to be a software engineer. It's more like, who are you, Amy? And like, who do you want to be? And, one of our favorite phrases is, it doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is where you're going. So where do you want to go, or where do you think you want to go? And how do we help you get there? Right? And if that changes over time, that's fine, right? Because that variable, that X, is going to change. And it's what you do with the skills and knowledge that you learn in that journey that's more important, not necessarily what you want to do. And one student, for example, Amy, through our program, she thought, because she grew up here in the Bay Area, she thought, oh yeah, I want to be a software engineer because that's what everyone does in the Bay Area. And then through our program, she met some people that were in marketing and, non-engineering positions. And she was like, oh my God, like this seems so much more interesting. Like, so, they have these realizations, just by talking to people. They're like, oh, actually, maybe I kind of want to do that. That seems more interesting. So it's just like making these connections for students. And literally, you now have a contact at Microsoft, at Facebook. Like, use that for yourself, but also use it for, your friends and your family and people that you care about. We had one student, Rachel, who 2 years ago, she was really interested in forming a hackathon at her high school for girls. So one of the people that she met at Facebook, actually helped her create a hackathon hosted at Facebook. And I think they had like 100 or 200 girls actually come in for that hackathon. So, it's again, like leveraging, like, what is the impact that these students want to make and how can we make that happen? So that's a little bit about Destined for X. But it's really born out of this desire of, like, again, kind of going back to like that guilt that I felt at Microsoft and making the best change that I can with the tools that I have at my disposal, the privilege that I now have, and not just keeping it all to myself.
Okay. That was a lot on Destined for X, but I love it. I had not actually heard that origin story before. And yeah, I gotta say, after attending the banquet with all the kids at it, it was just, I never thought I'd say I was inspired by like teenagers.
They do have that effect. We're like, yeah, we're here to inspire them, and then we come out of like, oh, whoa, you're doing awesome stuff. I wish I was like you when I was a kid. Like, so
exactly.
Yeah, the kids are awesome. Yeah,
I was like, no way are they this like articulate and like well intentioned, and they had this drive to execute, and they, like several of them like came up and just talked to me afterward out of nowhere, and I was like, wow, like you're just on point.
Yeah.
And so many of them have like community driven, ideas to help their local community too. It's not just like, I want to go become a millionaire, right? It seemed really focused on like, how do I lift those around me up as well?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is just, oh my God, so inspiring. So before I gush too much about that, I think we touched on a lot of parts already, but I want to go through in order to properly set the stage with like,
sure.
Maybe some more detailed context, and dive into really your life journey. And, I absolutely think it's crazy important to know where you're going. But I also think having the context of your past really does help us understand, who is Josh? Why does he do what he does? But maybe even in a deeper context. So I actually want to start with like your childhood and what it was like growing up with your parents, and whether you can trace back your characteristics or qualities to your parents.
Oh, sure. Great question. I've actually thought about that a lot over the past several years. So like I mentioned earlier, I parents didn't have education, came from a low income background, but when I was growing up, none of that really, I never thought about it. It was just, that was my reality, right? I didn't think like, oh yeah, I'm lacking or I'm missing anything. Like, the life that I knew was just the life that I knew, right? And for me, it seemed perfectly normal. And I recall there was this one point when I was in middle school where, every single weekend, like my parents would be, clipping coupons and whatnot. And said, okay, that's normal. And this one Saturday, my dad was like, oh, like, what do you want to eat? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and, my dad comes up, he's like, okay, well, I have some coupons here for like, 50-cent corn dogs at Wiener Schnitzel. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. So we, at the time, I didn't know this. It was just my reality, didn't have that much money. And, we didn't want to even drive anywhere because, the cost of gas and everything. So my dad was just like, let's walk to the Wiener Schnitzel, right? And, get us, some corn dogs. And so it was like a 1.5 mile walk, but we got there, we had, my 50-cent corn dogs, and I was the happiest kid in the world, like, with my little corn dog, and, he got me a little ice cream cone too. And that was dinner. Right. And it was less than $2, but it felt so nice, right? To spend quality time with my dad and like, just walk to this, fast food restaurant with him. And I mean, I think that's an example of how like I didn't have that much, but I I didn't think that it was a bad experience. And so, it wasn't until I came to Stanford that I realized people can spend $30 on a dinner. Like, what is this sorcery? Like, this is crazy. Because my whole, my childhood was like, yeah, we'll get a, McDonald's Happy Meal or like a $5 pizza from Little Caesars. And like that was my reality. And like, I loved it. Right. Because, it was not so much the food or, anything in particular. It was just that my parents really loved me and they really cared about me. And I was very, very lucky in that sense. And so even if we didn't have like the nice things, I had a nice family relationship with my parents. And, my mom in particular, like I call her like my queen of the universe. Cause, she really is that figure to me. She, anything that I wanted growing up, or, if I wanted to like do a speech competition, if I wanted to, go, apply for a scholarship, if I wanted to like, go to college and didn't have all the answers, she was just like, yeah, you can do it. Like, just go do it. You'll figure it out. You deserve it. Like you're smart. Like, and she just gave so much positive reinforcement and encouragement that, I sometimes, to this day, I still struggle believing in myself sometimes. And, my mom is just this constant figure of like, you can do it. Like you got to Stanford, you got to Microsoft, you got to Apple. Like you get this next thing that you want to do, you can do it. Like, but always in like a very, very loving, positive, encouraging way. And my dad sometimes is a little bit, or sometimes the complete opposite, where he's like, no, you should be a little cautious. Like think twice before you do that thing. Like, and so, an example of that is, one time when I was at Stanford, my sophomore year, again, going with the theme of like, I wanted to work at Apple, and I wanted to design products, and a lot of the products that they make, are manufactured in China. So I thought, what would be a better way into Apple than, doing an internship in China, right? Showing that like I can go to China, I can work in China, I can learn the language, I can, kind of like see the factory lines and like how things are made and get that experience. So I applied and got into this internship, to go to China. And when I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I got this internship. Like, I'm only the second sophomore in the history of China to get this. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is so exciting. Like, the year of Chinese that I took is like going to pay off. And like, I'm going to get to practice it. And like, I'm going to get to live in another country. And like, I was just so excited. He's like, no, you're not going. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not going? He's like, China is dangerous. Like, you don't speak the language. It's like, yes, Dad, I actually do. Not very well, but I can speak a little bit. Like it's completely different. Like the people there, like you got to be careful, and like maybe it's not safe. And I'm just like, Dad, I'll be fine. I'm going. And it was me kind of putting my foot down because my dad is very, very cautious, and my mom is more throws her care into the wind, like, yeah, like let's do it, right? And so sometimes for me growing up, it was always this battle of like, I know I can do this thing and I'll have the encouragement, but at the same time, think about the consequences and think about like, your safety, or like how much this is going to cost, or, and I think my parents, to this day still, even if they're not telling me things, I hear their voices and those like, decision factors in my head, like, oh wait, like if I run this nonprofit, yeah, like I can, do all these positive things and I can do it. But at the same time, oh my God, like, we have to pay for housing and we have to pay for food and we have to like, this is going to cost money. Like, how do I do that? Right. So, I do hear those voices, when in my daily life now. Yeah. So, I guess where I was going with this was, both my parents really played into like who I am, today. But yeah, I think more than anything, I was very fortunate that, I have a good relationship with them. And, like any family, like we're not perfect and we sometimes like have our arguments and whatnot. But when, I came here and to the Bay Area again, because my family's in LA, it was a big culture shock for me because I was physically separated from the people who I am the most closest with, because I'm their only son. I don't have brothers or sisters. They're my only parents. And like as a family unit, like we didn't have, family members that lived close by. So a lot of the stuff that we did for me growing up was like, it was just us. Right. So when I came here, it was weird because I was like, I'm not close to them. And now I have to like, form new relationships with other people. And a lot of the values here in the Bay Area were sometimes and oftentimes antithetical to what I grew up with. Like I grew up with like, really caring and loving and supporting, and like, we don't need all these nice things. Like all we need is like to be there for each other, right? And I come here to the Bay Area sometimes, and it's like, oh, like, look at all these Teslas, look at all these people working in tech. And like, the first question people ask you when they meet you is like, oh, like, what do you do? Where do you work? Like, kind of like sizing you up, like, oh, you work at like Facebook. Oh, well, I work at Google. Like, I work at Apple, like, kind of this stuff. And it was weird for me because I'm like, is that really where I want to tie my worth? And I started to go through this like, oh my God, like who am I? And like, what am I worth? And what do I have to offer to society? And like, are people going to think less of me because I work at Microsoft and not at Google? And like, like all this weird stuff. And so the past 4 years have been a lot of this thinking of like, wait, like, do I just kind of like fit in and conform, or do I want to like, really root myself in who I know I am, what matters to me, what makes me happy, what I know makes me happy, and what makes me feel fulfilled, right? And I went through a lot of that these past few years, which I'm sure we'll cover later on in the interview. But I think that's really where a lot of these questions about like, what impact do I want to have, and why did I start D4X, and why do I now work where I do? Like it was because of a lot of these things that my parents kind of did for me.
Wow. So to recap, it sounded like you had a really good balance between go get it, you got this, and yes but.
Yeah, there was right? A lot of yes but, not necessarily yes and, it was a yes but.
It was just consider this. Consider this, right? So it's like pragmatism with, maybe conservative pragmatism with just like, go for it. And it's really interesting to me that you said you still hear their voices today, because I just saw an article the other day saying that the voices our parents use to speak to us are the voices we have in our own head.
Yeah. I believe it 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Like the more I look at it, I'm like, I can always hear them. Middle school and high school were how for you?
Middle school was tough, actually. I think I really struggled with, I've for most of my life struggled with like, as weird as it is, like relationships with my parents, fine, solid for the most part, but relationships, friends with other people, I've always really struggled like answering the question, where do I fit in? Like, is this person like using me, or do they want to actually be my friend because they care about me and they find value in me, and like they like spending time with me, right? So middle school, I remember one day I came home from school and I was crying to my mom, like, oh my God, like I think I just made my first friend. Like, and I mean, I had friends, before, but it didn't really click because it was like, I think this person literally said like, oh yeah, like, we're friends now or something. I was like, oh, like this is official. Like I have a friend, so
they said it.
Yeah, he said it. Like validation, but no, cause in middle school, I was just very, very focused on like my studies. Like that was it. Right. And so, what came at a cost of like focusing so much on my school was like, I was often like, labeled a loner, and like I was a loner. Like during lunch, I was like, I would eat really quickly and then I would go back to the classroom or to one of the picnic tables and just work on my homework. And like, I was so laser focused on like, I need to finish my assignments. I need to get like, 100% on them. Like it's got to be like, perfect. Everything's got to be perfect. And, I have to be like the best in the class, even at the sacrifice of like, friendships and like things that I realize now, like, oh, actually that might've been even more important than, what I was focused on. So middle school was very, very hard for me. I do still have, very close friends from that time period, but I do remember being bullied a lot, and that was really rough. I think being bullied for anything is can be a very traumatic experience. And I remember one time, being punched in the stomach by a kid because I didn't give him like my fruit roll up or something, and I'm like,
what the fuck?
Yeah. So there are these moments where it's just like, and again, I think those experiences kind of like made me retreat into myself and like not be so trusting of other people. For a lot of my educational career. So middle school was rough, but I think the real turning point was when that one teacher told me, oh, apply to this high school. It's for students who come from low income backgrounds, or are going to be the first in their families to go to college. So that high school was like an amazing experience for me. Soar Early College High School in Lancaster, because it was this environment, this vibe of we're in this together, right? Like we all have this common goal. Like we all want to like get our associate's degree or go to a 4-year university. Like that is why we are here, right? And if your grades start to slip or whatnot, like we'll try to help you. But if you're not in that right mindset, or you realize like actually like maybe this isn't for me, then you go to a normal high school. Like so it was very self-selecting. So I loved high school for that experience, and that's when I created some of my closest friendships, because it was people that like also were like me, that like they wanted to do well in school, and they focused on their assignments, and like everything else was like important, but not as important as this common goal. And so I really loved that experience, and I think from high school, it made me get out of my shell. Like, oh my God, like I don't have to be the loner anymore. I can be the leader. And so again, because my high school was brand new, I was only the second graduating class. There were no clubs in the high school at all. And so for me, it was like, oh, well, like maybe I can start one, right? Or two or three. And so I remember I started a debate club at first, which was interesting because I was very introverted, and now I want to start a debate club, which involves a lot of talking in front of people. So it's like, what's going on? And then after that, I was like, oh, but I also like math and science. So I started a math and science club, which I think you'll appreciate, given how much I love Apple. I called it iClub. Had nothing to do with Apple. We did not talk about Apple. I was just like, I think it'll be cute if I call it iClub. So that club, actually, I remember I was so Apple fanboy. I made like little posters that was like, one was like eye opening, like this is the club you've been waiting for, and like it's like like the club is opening, but it's also like eye opening. It's like all these little things that I had so much fun, and that actually became the biggest club at my high school. My high school only had, I think at the time, like 300-ish students, and 50 kids joined, so a good portion of the school. And then I started like a rocketry club, and then like a robotics club, and managing all of these things while in high school and taking college classes, it was a lot, but I was so intellectually stimulated, and I loved the impact that I was having, because I remember like kids would come in to iClub, for example, and they'd have some interest in science or math or whatnot, but I made it fun for them, right? It's just like, okay, like here's Bernoulli's principle, and like here's a hair dryer and like a ping pong ball, and like you can make the ping pong ball float in midair with like the hair dryer, and the kids were like, whoa, that's so cool, right? Or I would bring in a professor from the college who would bring in liquid hydrogen or liquid nitrogen, and they would dip like a flower in and then smash it on a table, and like science can be fun, like it really can be fun. So that was just an awesome experience, like all of high school, because it allowed me to see like I can actually like affect change in the world. Like if I want to start a club, I can do that. All I need to do is like find a group of people that like also want to do that and want to lead this, and like just go do it. Like find people, like find resources. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned, is just like, if you have an idea, just find out what you need to do to make it happen. Like just be very execution oriented. Like I wanted to start Destined for X. I had never started a nonprofit. I had no idea how to start a nonprofit. So it was just like, Google was my best friend, like how to start a nonprofit. Okay, I need to file like these 3 forms. And it's like, oh my God, shoot. Like I got to like fill out like these IRS forms and whatnot. And like, this is really scary. And then I got the form, and it's like, wait, just one sheet of paper, front and back, like name, address, what your nonprofit does. Oh, okay, that's not too bad, know. And you submit that, and now it's official. Wow, okay, that was not scary at all. Like building a team, like legit, just like posting on Facebook, like, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, working at Facebook. Like, does anyone want to like help me with this thing? And get people that respond, like, oh yeah, like amazing, like I want to help out. I can host some students at my company. I can like donate $100 to you or $500 or whatnot. And it's just like just make it happen. Like do that one thing that like it might seem scary, or like who would want to support me, or like that's a crazy idea, but just do it, right? And the people that will come to the forefront are the people that like you should cherish, because they're like, oh my God, like they value me and my idea, and like they want to help me make this change in the world, and like it's exciting, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about middle school and high school. I feel like I'm just going all over the place, and I get really excited. So forgive me if I go on tangents.
No, that's fine. And the excitement's rubbing off, like, to be sure. Yeah, that's fantastic. And just to summarize a bit of what I heard, right? First of all, I think what I saw was you're learning that ideas are way less scary to implement than you thought, right? Like you come and you're like, oh my God, it's so much. I have to do that and that and that. And it can get easy to get overwhelmed as you imagine like the whole process you have to go through to do your thing. But then like once you start, you're like, wait, these are actually like bite-sized chunks that I can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then like, oh wait, other people want to do this too. And which is so cool to me. And the fact that you're able to build that like grassroots interest, using Facebook groups, which are, a rarely talked about thing, but honestly so awesome when you get into it. Not to just like plug Facebook too much, but that's literally not my intent here. I really don't talk about the company outside of work really at all. But it's that the fact that you're able to drum up that sort of support to do something so altruistic and truly useful for people, to grow in areas that you would consider hard to grow in. Right? Like that's real diamond in the rough shit right there.
Yeah.
And that to me is like so inspiring that not only are you doing this, but other people want to help.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it sounds like. So that's phenomenal. And, it gives me a lot more faith in, just people in general. And I hope it does the same for our audience. I want to move to college though. So like, what was the transition? Like you mentioned, you got to Stanford, right? I want to hear like, what did it take to get from where you were into Stanford, and then what was the Stanford experience for you like? And could you highlight any like key like light bulb moments?
Sure. So I think perfect segue, as I was talking about the clubs, I think that's when I realized I have this, and I think everyone does, honestly, this entrepreneurial drive. And, I think most people, when they think of like entrepreneurial drive, it's like, oh yeah, you start a tech company, or you start, this big company, or, an Apple or a Google. But really it's just, for me, an entrepreneur is someone who has an idea for something that they want to do, whether it's a company or, a website or a product, and they figure it out and they just go do it, right? So it can be a product, it can be a service, it can be an experience, right? Everyone is an entrepreneur. It's just, I think sometimes, especially being in Silicon Valley, we think like entrepreneur equals tech startup, right? Which is not necessarily the case. So for me, for example, when I was in high school, like starting these clubs, like it was like taking this interest that I had and forming a group of people behind it and making it a reality. Like that's all it was, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that really, I showcased that in my application to Stanford. And I didn't realize this at the time, but I think the way that I phrased it was like really catchy to my Stanford admissions officer, because I literally wrote like, there were all these clubs that I wanted to start and they didn't exist. So I just started them. Like that was literally like those two sentences. It's just like, I saw something that I wanted to do, so I did it. Right. And going back to, Andrew Patterson, who told me like, oh, okay, you want to start something very similar, just go do it. It's like, okay, there's something I want to do. Let me go do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what helped me get into Stanford. It wasn't, of course, I had the good grades. I had, the well-rounded, extracurriculars and, good grades and everything. But I think more than anything, it was that passion, right? Of like, I think they saw in me like this person, like who has a lot of passion and energy and like excitement and wants to make a difference in the world, and has the confidence to just go figure it out, even if he's never done it before. Mm-hmm. So the Stanford experience was similar to high school, like just amazing. I loved it, like every single aspect of it, except midterms and finals. That was really stressful. But like every college, everyone has to go through that. But again, it was just like going into this common theme of like me, like a lot of my happiness and fulfillment comes from being around other people who like are equally, if not even more ambitious and smart and driven. And like, they know what kind of impact and influence they want to have in the world, and like they just go for it, right? And so being at Stanford, yes, I mean, we took classes and we did all this stuff, but really the formative moments for me were when I was up until like 2 a.m. with a group working on a project, and I got like burned by a glue gun, and like all these like weird little things that like it was just like people bonding and experiencing, and like just sharing, sometimes in like this torture and dread of like, oh my God, we have this big project that's due tomorrow. Like, how do we do this? Like, it's okay. Like, we got it. Like, we'll figure it out. Like, we'll make it work. And I remember this one project for ME 101, Introduction to Mechanical Engineering, where we had to like make this little, not robot, but like mechanism that was like a quote unquote, like a dog and a person. And so the dog had to like start by like touching the person, and then it had to roll away like 3 feet, and then the person had to like wait 5 seconds and then throw a ball, and then the dog had to catch the ball, and then we got extra credit. The dog like came back and like returned the ball to the person. And so like all of this was made of like poster board and foam core and cardboard and like strings and yarn and marbles and just random stuff. And you know, we were, my team and I, we were up till like 2 a.m, 3 a.m, and we were like testing it. And it would fail and it would fail and it would fail and it would fail. And then it would get really close and then it would fail. And it's like, oh my God, like, come on, like, please work. And then finally there was this one light bulb moment for us where it was just like, oh wait, like if we just like wrap this yarn around here and like, you know, put like one more marble or whatever, like then it'll work. And then like we ran it and everything worked flawlessly. And we were like jumping up and down, like, oh my God, like we did it, like this is amazing. So, you know, it's those moments of like, oh my God, like we have this like seemingly insurmountable task ahead, and like then like time is running out, and like, you know, how do we do this? And then just like putting all of our heads together and being like, okay, like we got this, right? Like those are the moments that like I really loved about being at Stanford. And you know, honestly, like I share this with other people too. Like even when I started working at Microsoft, like maybe 10% of what I actually learned in the classroom, I actually used in my day-to-day at work. Because most of the stuff that I learned or that I was doing, I just had to learn on the job. So again, like maybe another theme is just, you know, again, like when I first started working there, even though I had interned in the past, the project that I had was like, I've never done this before. Like, how do I do it? Like, okay, just go figure it out. Be like, go research it, become an expert in it. Like, you know, just own it. And I struggled a lot, you know, because it was my first like real, like, I am a full-time engineer now. Like, this is me, right? But also like this lack of confidence sometimes of like, am I really an engineer? Like, did they hire me by mistake? Like, you know, like, and, you know, I started to, you know, kind of like not believe that I had the chops to do it. Right. And you know, that's happened quite a few times too, but
imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome for sure. And it's weird because a lot of people talked about it at Stanford, but at Stanford, I never felt that for some reason. Like I was like, no, I'm doing well. Like I'm doing well in my classes. Like I'm happy here. Like I'm an RA in a dorm, and like, you know, I'm president of this or financial officer of this. And like, I got this, right? And it was a struggle and it was stressful, but I never felt like I was incapable of doing it all. It was hard at times, but I never felt like, oh, like I'm not up to snuff. Whereas when I was working at Microsoft, and I think in my professional career, that's when the imposter syndrome has really hit the hardest, because it's like, wait, do I actually know how to do this? Wait, no one knows how to do this. They just learned how to do it. Like I can learn how to do things like that. That is what humans do. We find a problem and we don't have the answers, and then we just figure it out. I think Stanford was great. I think one of the big things that I learned about like what makes me happy, again, just another thing that I learned that makes me happy was like being very like people focused. So even though I was majoring in product design engineering, which is a subset of mechanical engineering, I chose that major because I didn't just want to do like pure mechanical engineering. And when I say like pure mechanical engineering, like, you know, people that take like thermodynamics and fluid mechanics and, you know, mechatronics and all this stuff. And I'm just like, no, like, you know, I want to like have a bigger picture of like, not just here's this thing, how to build it, right? It's like, wait, who is the user? Who is the customer? What are we building? Why are we building it? Like, you know, and really shaping that experience or product or service. And yes, of course, the building part is part of that, right? But when I was sophomore, for example, I was, was it my junior year? I don't know. It was one of those years. I was running one of the biggest job fairs on campus. And just a small example of like being just focused on like the customer, the user. When you think of a job fair, what do you think of? Like, who is the user?
Right. Someone seeking a job, hopefully.
Yeah, like the student, right? But one thing that I found was that like previous job fairs put so much emphasis on the students that they forgot about the recruiters and all of the company representatives. So when I was running the team for the job fair, I was like, well, how do we make this experience really good for the recruiters? And so we put together this team of, we call them courtesy volunteers, just like literally people there whose job it was to make sure the recruiters were taken care of. Like, they would come, help them with their bags, make sure that they, found parking easily, make sure that they walk them down to like the auditorium where the job fair was happening, like bring them waters, like direct them to the restrooms. Like their entire job was just making sure that they felt comfortable. Like this is a good space for them. And I think, again, for me, that was really rooted culturally because my parents were always focused on like, how do we make this a good people experience, right? Like, because my mom, for example, like anytime, and maybe I think this is a Hispanic like family thing, like, anytime we had a visitor or someone over to our house, like, oh, let me get you some water, let me get you some fruit, let me get you some food, let me get you this, and of course, like, people are like overwhelmed, like, oh my God, like, do I really have to eat all of this stuff, right? But for me, I think going into college, it's like, oh my God, yeah, like these recruiters are guests on our campus, like, how do we make them feel like this is their home too? And that experience, just that one aspect of like having these courtesy volunteers, I once went up to the Microsoft recruiter, and again, I had no inclination or idea ever to potentially work at Microsoft, but I went up to him and I was like, oh, like, hello sir, like, how are you doing? Like, can I get you some water? Can I like, show you where, this or this room is? And he's like, oh, no, that's fine. Like, but, and, we started chatting about like, me and my experience and like how I was running, this job fair. And he's like, oh, that's so interesting. Do you mind if I have your resume? So he took my resume, and then a couple weeks later, he emails me like, that was the best job fair I've ever been to. Like, just the fact that people attended to me, like no one's ever done that at a job fair. And I want you to interview for a position here. And I'm like, what? Wow. So it was those little things where like, I realized like, wait a minute, like, yes, I could have just gone up and like networked and, done the whole, like, my name is Joshua Mendoza, I'm a sophomore, junior, blah, 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 studying, blah, blah, blah. But really it was more about like, I just made it a good people experience for him. Right. And I think being very like just open and genuine, like I'm not here looking for a job. I just want to make sure that you feel taken care of. Right. And that's something that I've learned is hugely important. Just treat people as people. Not, yes, he's a recruiter, but he's more than just a recruiter. Like he also gets hungry. He also gets thirsty. He also gets lonely. Like, and like, what are how can my existence here on earth make other people's experiences like better? Right. Not just, oh, you can help me get this job. Oh, you can help me like get this funding. Oh, you can help me do this. Like all these people, yes, they do that as part of their jobs, but like, I like connecting with people kind of like my parents did. Like, how do I make you feel like we're family? Which again is weird for me to say because I sometimes feel like I struggle so much with like forming these relationships because it does sometimes feel weird for the other person. Like, wait, you don't just want to like talk to me because we can give you funding? Like, you actually want to like get to know me? Like, yeah, like you're a person, have feelings too. Like, yeah, of course I care about you, right? So.
That's so funny. Part of me thinks that that's because they're just uncomfortable with the concept of like human warmth sometimes. Yeah. Well, at least, sorry, my inner cynic thinks that. But that is so awesome. I had felt that with you before. And that like genuineness, that generosity of you're giving without something an expectation of return, right? You're turning what seems to be a typically like transactional relationship on its head, and maybe the other person receives it well, or they get confused because all they've ever known is transactional relationships. Yeah. Right? They're like, what is this?
This is weird.
Friend?
Not used to this.
Friend? What's up? No.
People, person like me? What?
Yeah, and that is so cool. And I think speaks volumes about you and also the environment that we find ourselves in, and like just how much impact you can have on someone's life by just treating them as if you like were on the other end of it, right? Like treat others like you'd like to be treated, right?
Yeah.
Like you're a person, not a robot who's just here to recruit or sell or whatever, right?
Right.
What's your job? Oh, that's all you are to me. Like, let me rank you against everyone else. Right? It's it sounds like it's almost like a value system shift from your profession to you as a person as the primary focus, right? You're like, I see you as a human first, and who does a job. You're not your title, who is a human.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That is so cool. And I'm really glad that we got there too, because I think this is really powerful stuff. Because it really does shift the paradigm on its head, especially in Silicon Valley. And like I noticed you commented on that earlier when, you came from your family background in SoCal and you come up here and suddenly you're thrust into this value system where it is always like, who are you and what do you do? Oh, you work there? Oh, or it's like, oh, you work there.
Yeah. You work where? Haven't heard of it.
Yeah. Oh, ew.
Yeah.
And that's so cool that you're turning that on its head from the inside. I love it. So I want to move on though, and trying to keep this moving. So we talked about actually a lot of light bulb moments. I just want to question you about whether there are any low points, or did you encounter any thorny issues? Because I find that many people, or this podcast is kind of aimed at helping people who feel lost a bit, and who might have encountered some struggles. And I just want to see, like, did you encounter anything that was beyond the regular, like, stress, or what? Or I guess I don't want to box you in. I want to ask, like, what were any thorny points, and how did you deal with them?
Never in my life. I've had a perfect life. Doesn't everyone? Like, what is struggle? No, absolutely. The past 4 years, the past 2 years really were some of the hardest, I think, in my entire life. There were several periods of time where, like, I struggled sometimes with feeling like, sad, or like kind of like, I can't do this. But there were like a period of like 8 months recently where I just every day woke up so depressed, thinking, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Is this really what I want to do? Like, and just questioning my entire existence. And it was really hard and painful. And there were many times during that process where I was like, I was starting to give up, right? Like, if I can't figure it out, like, is there any reason for me to be here, right? And that thought, as scary as it was, like, it crossed my mind not once, not twice, but multiple times. And I was telling one of my friends recently that I remember, like, 6 months ago, sitting in my car, just, with my seat back and looking up at the ceiling. Do I really want to live? Like, I feel so miserable right now. Like, I see no point of living, because tomorrow I have to go through this again, and the next day I have to go through this again, and just feeling so lost, and like, and it was so hard for me. And I didn't know how to get out of it. And I remember one time one of my friends visited me, a college friend visited me at ChargePoint, one of my previous companies, to get lunch. And he always knew me as like this really happy, bubbly, energetic, like, kind of like I am right now, like kind of a person. And, I confided in him and I said, Daniel, like, I wish I could say I'm doing better, but I've been struggling with depression for like many, many months now. And he was kind of taken aback, like, what do you mean? Like, and he didn't really know how to respond to that. And I wasn't looking for him to solve my problem or anything, but it was weird, because I was like, what is going on with me? Like, I don't recognize myself anymore. And there was this point of real vulnerability when I was working at ChargePoint, of talking to my manager and my director and other coworkers, and it was really hard for me to initiate that conversation. But I started off, I would get each of them in a room and say, look, so and so, like, I'm really struggling right now, and I feel like it's not just, when I try to keep work and life separate. But when my life starts interfering with my work, I feel like I have an obligation to tell you, as a coworker, manager, whatever, that I'm not doing good. And I don't expect you to solve this problem for me. I just want you to know that I'm going through this right now, right? So whether, like, and I'm not asking you to take more work off my plate or anything, just know, right? Because I don't think it's on you to fix this problem for me, but it's definitely on me to tell you this, right? And tell you, I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to get better. And I don't know how, but these are the things that I'm doing. And so a lot of kind of digging deeper into like why I was feeling a lot of this way was, going back to the imposter syndrome. At Stanford, I felt fine. In high school, I felt fine. Like I got this. Like, I'm smart. I'm capable. Like, I can do this. But once I entered the workforce, and I think it's partially because I was so young, right? And when I was at Microsoft and ChargePoint, like, and most companies, like, there's people there that are 25 and there's people there that are 55, and, every age in between and every experience level in between and every, not just even school experience, but just life experience in between. And so when I was in high school, if you think about like, this bowl of fruit, like, here's all of the students at my high school, and like, this is me. And like, I could clearly say like, oh yeah, like compared to everyone else, like I have these grades, right? And that puts me in like the top 1% or 2% or whatever. And then you get to Stanford and it's like, oh, okay, we're all like the top people, right? And am I still the top 1%? Do I care about that? And at Stanford, I didn't care, right? Because it was this environment, right? It was the environment, not so much the ranking that made me feel happy. Like, yeah, I am one of the best because I'm at one of the best universities. But it was a real shift when I entered the workforce, because it's like, all of these people are really smart. And like now I felt like I had to be like still in that top 5 percentile or whatnot. And that was really stressful for me, because I was like, but I don't know all these things that like people that have 10, 20, 30 years of experience know. Like I feel dumb and stupid, and like, I don't know how to do this. And, why do these people know more than me? And like, why do they know the answer immediately? And I have to go and research it. And it was so stressful for me. And, then I was dealing with, my family was going to retire, soon. And like, they were living in this house that, was 2 stories, and there were no bathrooms on the first floor, or full bathrooms on the first floor, and no bedrooms on the first floor. And when I went back home, like I could tell my dad, who, is 71 now, was, like crouching up because, he has a bad back, and, having to do that every day. And my mom, who was waking up at like 3 a.m. every morning for like the past 30 years to go to work. And, there were all of these things like, oh my God, like I got like my parents are going to retire. Like I can't let them live in like this house. Like I want to buy them like a new house that's like 1 story so like they can like be fine. And like, I don't want them to fall or anything. And like, I was going through like, okay, like, parents, and like me figuring out like, is Microsoft the company I want to work at? Is ChargePoint the company I want to work at? Where do I want to work at? What do I want to do? Do I want to still be an engineer? Do I want to do Destined for X full time? Do it like what? And there were all of these questions like, am I more valuable as a human being because I have a Tesla Model S, or like, was I fine just with my Honda Civic, which like, it was a cheap car, but like it got me places, like, and there were all these questions like, what am I doing? And, it was overwhelming. And I didn't know how to handle it, but it took me several years to kind of, come up with answers to these questions. And, I'm glad I went through that struggle, because now I have a much clearer idea of like what matters to me, who matters to me, why that matters to me, versus just blindly accepting what is important to other people and saying, yeah, this is important to me. And then just doing that for the sake of feeling like I fit in better, versus doing it because I actually enjoy it. And like a good example of that is, I had a friend recently who, he loves going to Michelin star rated restaurants, like once a month minimum. Right. And I had never gone to a Michelin star rated restaurant. Cause I mean, for me, like, I don't see value in spending $200, $300, $400 on a meal. Like, and I told him like, what you spend on one meal, I try to spend in a month. Right. But I went to this restaurant with him, and I mean, it was a great experience, but it was like, then he started to kind of push it on me, like, you should be going to Michelin rated restaurants like once a month. Like, you have enough money, you can afford it. And I'm like, no, this makes me really uncomfortable, because going back to that example, like, I came from a background where I was perfectly happy eating a 50-cent corn dog. I don't need to spend $300 on a meal. I can, but it doesn't make me happier. Like, you can take me to Chipotle and I'll be the happiest guy with like a burrito bowl. You can take me to McDonald's and give me a Filet-O-Fish and I'll be the happiest guy on earth. Like, I don't need to feel like my life has to have these really nice things to be happy.
And how did you, so you mentioned that there was, a many year period that it took you to figure this stuff out. And it sounds like, just to repeat it back to you, that you're going from what other people set as standards for happiness to your own, finding like to do it, finding that you like doing more things that you enjoy rather than things that other people say you should enjoy. Yeah. And so what I want to get into is like the process by which you discovered what you enjoy. Like, how did you discover who matters to you, what matters to you?
So I like to make the analogy of a pizza. So I love pizza, but I'm very particular about the toppings that I have on my pizza. So like, for example, I love pepperoni pizza. Hawaiian pizza, not so much, but I'll eat it, right? If given the choice. So I liken my experience at Microsoft and at ChargePoint and, now Apple to like different pizzas. And so when I was working, and I'll go into like the professional side of like, what matters to me and, whatnot, and then I'll go into the other ones. But at least in a professional sense, it's like, okay, Microsoft is, a Hawaiian pizza, let's just say, for example. And the toppings are very big company, good benefits, good salary. But, the team that I was on was, there were not a lot of young people. It was not the most diverse in terms of like age or ethnicity. Like I was the only Hispanic person on the team. Actually only Hispanic engineer, I think, in the whole building, even after 2 years of hiring people. And, the product that we were working on was like really, really cool, but it wasn't something that, and I guess to give context, I worked on HoloLens, which is, if you think of Oculus, like very similar to Oculus, but more focused on like education and not consumer, corporate markets. So, this mixed reality headset. So very cool product to work on fresh out of college, but not something where, in middle school, I was like, oh yeah, like I want to work on VR, MR, whatnot. So like those are the toppings on the Microsoft pizza. So when I quit Microsoft back in October 2017, I actually took 5 months off, and I quit, and I didn't have something else lined up.
Oh.
And yeah, right. Like
took a leap of faith.
Yeah, and it was the most terrifying experience for me, because I was going through all these things of trying to figure out like, is this it? Because when I started working at Microsoft, I was like, this is it. I made it. I became this engineer that I always wanted to be at one of the top, companies in the world. It's not Apple, but like it's very similar to Apple, right? Kind of.
Hawaiian pizza.
What?
Hawaiian pizza.
Hawaiian pizza. And so, when I took those 5 months off, I was like, maybe do I want to do tech, or do I want to do like real estate? Because at the time I was really interested in like real estate and, apartment syndications and whatnot, because it was a way to like potentially, make more money. And so I was like, okay, does making more money matter to me? Like if I do this, because again, the mentality that I had growing up was, especially coming from my dad, was there's not enough. Like don't spend money. Like, and so for me, the way that I think I've compensated since growing up till now was, what can pay me more money, right? But as I mentioned, when I was living in my apartment in Milpitas at the time, where I was paying $2,000 in rent, I was like, I make a lot of money and I spend a lot of money, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck, just like my family was growing up. Is this really like important? No. And so where was I going with this? So, Hawaiian pizza at Microsoft. So then when I took that 5 month break, it was like, okay, how do I change the toppings on this pizza? Let's, instead of this big corporate company, let's try something a little bit smaller, maybe startup or mid-sized business. Instead of, an industry that's really cool, but that I'm personally not like, has been a lifelong dream or mission for me to work on, let's do something in like energy or sustainable transportation or electric vehicles, which I've always been really interested in. Let's look for a company that has a team that's maybe a little bit more diverse and has younger engineers on it. And so, as I was running, through these qualities that I was looking for on my next pizza, it was like, okay, either Tesla or ChargePoint. And I heard horror stories about working at Tesla, and I was like, you know what? I'll support the company by having the car, but I don't think I want to work there too. So let's try ChargePoint. So I called the hiring manager up. I was like, hey, like your company seems really interesting. I think my passion came through again, because during that 5 month period, I actually did a road trip from San Francisco all the way down to the Florida Keys in my Model S. And so, I shared that story in, this one instance where like I was about to run out of battery and like I was at 1%. So like I was driving at like 5 miles an hour and like turning like the heater off and everything. And like, I get really excited about, just sharing these stories. And so I think that really came through in my interview, and they were like, this guy's awesome. Like he has so much passion and energy for like EVs, and like, let's hire him on. So I got that job at ChargePoint. And so, that pizza was, kind of like, that's what I was trying for the next 2 years. That's what I was eating. I don't know, let's call it olive pizza. And I realized they're like, oh, this is great. Like I have younger engineers that I can work with, that we can get lunch with. Like, it's not like I can relate to them more. The product is really interesting. I can literally go out to like, when I was running our Destined for X programming, we would go to Facebook and Microsoft, and I could literally point and say like, you see that charger there in the parking lot? Like I built that. Like I helped build that. And, you know, it's fun to be able to show the kids like, oh, wow, like, you know, you can come from where you came from and literally point to stuff in the world and say, I helped build that. So there were like really positives there. The one negative, though, was that I admittedly took a pay cut to go from Microsoft to ChargePoint. And that really was hurting me. Not in the sense of like, I need more money to like buy all these nice things, but in the sense of, like I mentioned earlier, like I had this goal ever since, you know, maybe like 6 months in starting at Microsoft, because I knew my parents were going to retire soon, of getting them this new house that, you know, they didn't have to, you know, climb stairs every single day. So for me, the money was hurting me because I was like, oh my God, like, is this going to delay how long it's going to take me to like get this house for my parents? And this caused a lot of stress and anxiety. And like, I was like, I can barely like, you know, I was literally like just squeezing every penny out of my budget that I could and just saying no to like everything that like cost more than like $10. Like literally my budget for food during like 3 years was like $10 a day. Like that's all I'm willing to spend on food.
Wow.
And like it would really confuse a lot of my friends. Like, Josh, you like work at you make 6 figures, right? And I'm like, yes, you can spend more than $10 on food. And I'm like, no. And you know, I would explain like this goal that I had, you know, to get my parents this house. Yeah, it was hard, but you know, that olive pizza taught me that like, okay, I like these things, but I can't sacrifice having a good salary because there are these goals, whether I like it or not, that some of them do cost a lot of money, right? Buying a house is not trivial.
Right.
And so once I was back in like October or so of last year, I was like, okay, I've been here at ChargePoint for almost 2 years. Time to think about my next thing. I updated my resume, my LinkedIn and everything. And then as fate would have it, because Apple was still, you know, in the back of my mind, Apple actually reached out to me and said, hey, we want to interview you for this position. And I'm just like, wait, Apple's choosing me? What? Like, and I was just like, I like called my parents and my friends like, I didn't apply to Apple. Apple's like, they want me. Like, this is amazing. Like, you know, I could not ask for anything more. So, you know, I interviewed with them and whatnot. And again, I think my passion for Apple came through, and, you know, it wasn't a perfect interview. You know, there were things that I didn't do as well as I think I should have, but I remember, you know, like I slept 2 hours the night before the interview because I was so excited, and I was like, oh my God, like this is my dream job. Like I'm going to interview at Apple Park, and like, it's just a beautiful campus. Like, oh my God, I get to work, I get to meet like the people that like are building all these products. And I was just so excited. And so, you know, the interview, you know, it went well. And so, you know, I got the offer, and I was just like, holy, you know, and it's just like, I have the Apple offer. Like Apple wants to hire me. Like, this is amazing. Like I get to like work in my dream company and like, you know, work on like dream products and everything. And like the paycheck is right. And like the benefits are right. And like the team, I just got this really good vibe from them. Like they're really sharp and intense, but like also very grounded. And like, they seem like they have fun. And like, I was just like, okay. And like all of the things that I learned from like these past 2 pizzas, like what's not like the Apple pizzas, like, I don't know, apple slices or something. It feels right. Right. And I think I appreciated it more because I'm actually glad that I didn't work at Apple right after college, because I think it would have launched me into an even further existential crisis of thinking, oh God, like I made it, like what now? Right. Like, but now it's like even the little things, I think I've learned to appreciate so much more. Like,
because you had the contrasting experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it is those small things that matter so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could recap that real quick, it sounded like, you know, so you have this crisis and you're wondering, is this it? And you start to think like, wait, what do I really value? What are the toppings I want in my pizza? Right. And you go through and you experiment with other companies to see, do I like these values better? Right. Like I didn't like the, you know, no one my age to hang out with, or, you know, the maybe more of the pineapple-y things at Microsoft, right? And then you go and you try olives. You're like, are olives what I like? And in order to do so, you launch yourself into the experience, and you pay attention, it sounds like, to what you like and you don't like, right? And then that lets you know, okay, I think I like this. And then you go try that new thing. So it sounds like this realm of, you know, first it starts with attention to your surroundings, and then paying attention to what you like about those surroundings.
Yeah.
And then moving and experimenting with new surroundings to see whether you like those better. And then after that, you start building a picture of, okay, what do I actually value here? Right. And that's also so cool to hear that Apple reached out to you. Like it's almost like your dream caught up with you. It's like, now you're ready.
Yeah.
You've had the perspective, you've seen the other things, you know what you value, and here you go. That's incredibly exciting. So that there's a bit of process. It sounds like if I abstracted it correctly.
It was definitely a process and a journey. And I'm thankful, as hard and difficult and, oftentimes very depressing as that period was, it makes me appreciate what I have now so much more, because I started to take certain things for granted, which now I think it's, last weekend when I was in Tahoe with some friends, like, people were not explaining, but like, just telling me, like, Josh, like, it's funny how sometimes for you, the littlest things make you so happy. Like I was telling you earlier when I was walking, up the elevator, not walking up there, but getting out of the elevator, to get here to your apartment, like, oh my God, like there's limestone on the wall. This is so beautiful. Like, little tiny details, or like, when I was in the Apple Park Fitness Center on Friday, I was like, the wall outlets are round and they're carved into the stone. Like, this is so cool. Like, it's like little things that make me so happy that I'm just like, oh, wow. Like there was actually a period of my time, and I don't want to go too in depth because it was really, really, really tough for me. But 3 years where I actually was living out of a car. And imagine, like, you're going to work or to school or whatnot, and you don't have a place to come back to, like an actual bed to sleep in. And I didn't have that for 3 years. And like, I was like showering at like the gym, and I was like, I didn't have a place to like host people. And like, I couldn't cook. I was just like depending on like, whatever, like I could like, get at like a fast food restaurant or something. And so, again, I don't want to go too in depth because it was really, really traumatic, but, now, just even having a little room in a house in Cupertino where I live with a couple housemates, I'm just like, I have a bed, and it's not a queen bed. It's not a California king bed. It's just a twin bed and a desk and a lamp. And I'm so happy because, and again, I'm glad that I went through that experience of like, I'm really, really glad that my life has kind of shown me that, like what matters and what doesn't matter, because I've had periods of my life like that one period where I had almost nothing. And now even little tiny things, like when we were in Tahoe last week, and it's like someone brought bagels, and I was like, oh my God, bagels, like this is amazing. Like, and there's cream cheese too. Cause I didn't even like, that would have been a luxury for me, in that period of time, cause I didn't have a place to keep food. And so, little things now that I try not to take for granted that, my whole life, I think, whereas I think, if I had grown into like a lot of privilege or whatnot, I would take these things for granted, I think, and not appreciate them as much. But because I think life kind of started me and my family off with like very little, as things have slowly, gradually been added to my life, I'm like, oh, this is nice. Oh, this is really nice. Oh, this is cool. Oh, this is cool. Versus like kind of starting here and forgetting about all the stuff that's down here that, is important. Because if you don't have even a place to sleep at night, a comfortable place to sleep at night, that really like can negatively impact you. So I think now, and that plays into Destined for X too, because we try to tell our students, like, because some of them have also been homeless at certain stages of their lives, or have lost a parent, or have gone through a really tough time, and it's like I get that. Like I know how hard it is to live out of your car. I know how hard it is to have this experience, and but you'll get through it, right? We're here to help you. Like we're here to support you. Like it's hard, and it will be hard, but just keep chugging along. Like just you can do this, right? So I think that perspective has really helped me appreciate like just little things. Like when I was coming here and like I see your setup, like it's like, oh my God, it's like red and black, like my favorite two colors. Like it's just, this is awesome, right? So yeah, little things matter a lot.
I had no idea about that period, and of you living out of your car, and I don't want to press on it hard if you don't want to go into it. But I do want to ask, if you had to do it all over again, what, if anything, would you change?
In my life or that particular experience?
Whole life. So looking back on your origin story so far.
I think there's two ways that I could take this. One is like the standard, like, oh, I wouldn't change a thing kind of a thing. And I do feel that way to a certain degree because there's just been so many precious moments in my life that I really appreciate, and also really crappy moments that I'm just like, I wish I didn't have to go through that. But as I reflect back on my life, I'm like, no, I'm actually, as crappy as some of those experiences were, I'm glad I went through them. Because, and it sounds cliche, but like I came out a better, stronger person on the other side. Like, whether that's like personal relationships or like, work or education. But I think if there was one thing, it would just not be so shy sometimes. And what I mean by that is it sometimes takes me time to open up to people. Again, just because there is still some of that, like feeling of like I'm scared for myself because I can be very helpful, often to my own detriment. Like if someone asks me for help, like I'll almost always like drop what I'm doing and like try to help them. But oftentimes, like if I do that enough times for enough people, then it's like, well, what have I done for myself, right? And so a good example of that is when I was for the past 3 years running Destined for X, like all of the time that I've been, doing that is time that I haven't been focusing on like myself or my career, or like how do I get promoted, or how do I, get a better paying job, or how do I, do all these things. I think, well, I could be more like focused on myself, but at the same time, like I do want to like contribute and give back and pay it forward. But if I do that too much, like one of my friends told me, like, you clearly like, are struggling right now, like financially or whatnot. Like, and I get that you want to do this, but like, just focus on, it's okay to like focus on yourself for some time. Like, just do that. Cause if you don't focus on yourself, if you don't take care of yourself, then no one else is probably going to do it. And if you like get sick or something, then like all the people that depend on you, like what's going to happen to them? Like, understand that like, you're a human being and like you have many gifts and talents to offer, but at the same time, like those gifts and talents like are dependent on me being okay. Right? And if I'm not okay, like, can I really give 100%? And that's something that looking back, I wish I did a better job of. And sometimes like it's literally come down to like, I literally put in my calendar now that I started at Apple, like Friday night from 6 p.m. to like 8:30 p.m. is my like self-care, like, spa time or whatever. Like, I'm not going to do work. I'm not going to like respond to text messages. I'm not going to do anything other than like just treat myself and focus on myself. And like this past Friday, like I did that and I was like, this is so nice and refreshing. Like, I went in the sauna and the steam room and like I got a burrito, and then, I just had dinner by myself with like a chocolate creme brulee and like a glass of wine. And I was like, this feels good. Like, why don't I do more of this? Because you can just work, but where's the enjoyment? Like, you're working for something, right? You need to like reward yourself every so often. So I think looking back on my life, I think that's something that I wish I would do better.
Yeah, well, that's great. And actually, what's happening actually as we go through this is you're organically heading off a bunch of questions I had planned in the future. And this one really ties into the one I have around intention. And there's a cool framework I ran into with intention, which is, your base intent with an action either is serving yourself or serving others.
Yeah.
And I like to ask, which is more fulfilling to you? And what I'm hearing back is that you can't over-index on serving others and not serve yourself, because that can actually end up being a long-term detriment to others if they depend on you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like if you're not fully there, like how are you going to be able to give something you don't have, right? So it's really good to hear you recognize that, because I don't think a lot of people do all the time, or maybe they over-index on the other side, right? They're just serving themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a little bit too much there.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to see someone, on that opposite end who's just over-indexed in service to others. But inspiring to hear that you figured it out and you're taking.
Well, not quite. I'm trying. I'm still trying to.
Or figured out that that's something you need to figure out. Let's start there, right?
There we go.
And you're working to address it. looking at today in your current situation, like if I were to give you a magic wand, what, if anything, would you change?
About my life?
Mm-hmm.
That is a good question. If there was one thing that I would change, I think it would be as confident as I think I can be sometimes. I think there is still a lot of that imposter syndrome. And sometimes that, like, it's not productive, right? Just questioning myself all the time, like, can I do this? Can I, like, figure this out? And that really, honestly, negatively impacts a lot of what I feel is, like, my performance, whether it's, like, doing D4X stuff or at work or, anything. Like, I can be very, very methodical and, like, a huge perfectionist, and, like, this has to be done this way, and like, this has to be like this, and this has to be like this, and, like, it's just got to be perfect, right? And that really, really slows me down sometimes. Like, I think the work that I can create is the work that I create is some of the best, and I'm proud of it, but not everything has to be type A 100% like perfect, right? And I think I wish I could harness that perfectionism more towards things that matter and less towards things that don't. And I think I've gotten better over the years, but there's still moments where I'm like, why are you focusing so much on this one little thing that, like, it doesn't matter in the big picture? Like, just get something, like, to, like, the 80% mark and just ship it. Right. And so I think it's frustrating for me, really. Like, I'll be at work or somewhere, and, like, I'll spend 5 hours on something that could have taken me, like, 30 minutes. Cause I'm like, it has to be perfect. It's like, I wish I could let go of that, because, the more that I realize, like, okay, this product that I'm working on, or this thing that I'm building, or this thing that I'm doing, like, in 3 months from now, like, people are not going to notice, like, that one little detail I spent 5 minutes on. They might, but I could have also worked on 10 other things in that amount of time, which probably could have had even more impact. So I think if I had a magic wand, I would just try to harness that perfectionism more towards things that matter, and less towards, trying to do everything, like, perfectly.
Interesting. That sounds like I would say, somewhat common problem or challenge. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Have you found any ways of addressing that?
I think I've definitely learned to let go over the years. Like, it's just the most ridiculous story, but when I was in, like, 4th or 5th grade, I had, like, a pool party at my house, and I invited, like, 3 or 4 of my friends from middle school, and then or elementary school, whenever it was. And I literally had an agenda of what the pool party was going to be like. It's like, okay, from, like, noon to, like, 1 p.m., we're going to, like, be outside cooking hot dogs on the grill. From 1 to 1:15, we were going to eat the hot dogs. From, like, 1:15, like, it was crazy, like, the amount of, like, detail that I would go into things. And, like, if my family, did a trip to, like, the park or to Disneyland, like, it was just like, okay, we're going to wake up at this time, we're going to leave at this time, like, driving is going to be exactly this amount of time, parking is going to take this amount of time, we're going to go on this ride, during this time. And I think, that it's just like, why am I doing this? Why does everything have to be, like, so timed perfectly, and be like, the world is not going to end if we get there 1 minute later or 1 minute earlier, or if, this, thing on a screen is moved 1 pixel up or 1 pixel to the right. Like,
And how would it feel if something was on time or off time?
Well, I think I've learned to focus less on time, but, like, something
or if something was on, like, say, if something followed your plan perfectly, how did it feel? And then how did you feel if it didn't?
Oh, but it never went perfectly, right? So, like, nothing ever goes perfectly. And,
Sure.
That's something that we tell our students in D4X too. It's like, and again, going back to the name, like, Destined for X, like, you might want to go there, but, like, the path to that X can be, like, this, or it can be straight, or it can be, going back and go around your head, and, like, then you'll finally get there. But, so it's never exactly what you plan. Like, you can make a plan, but it's never, ever, ever going to go exactly according to plan.
And how do you reconcile that with your perfectionism?
I think some things, like I mentioned, like, I just let it go. And it's definitely a process. Like, I don't make, like, detailed, like, agendas anymore for most things, unless it's, like, absolutely necessary. But there's still, like, I have this thing where like I like things to be really neat and tidy and organized. And one time when I was working at Microsoft, like I had this whiteboard, and I'm known for being very organized and detail oriented. And like I had all these little post-it notes of like, this is step 1, step 2, step 3. I need to talk to this vendor. I need to do this. Then I have to do that. And like they were all like color coded and like aligned perfectly with each other. And one time my manager came in and he like moved one of the post-it notes and like tilted it ever so slightly. And I was like, Jason, what are you doing? Like this is bugging me so much. It's
Oh
like,
my God.
dude, calm down. Like it's a post-it note. Like you're still going to get the information you need from it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And I still moved it back.
Oh my Lord. Okay, cool. So it sounds like, and for any, because I want to keep this also focused on the audience and any sort of like actionable steps they can take if they find that they have a similar proclivity towards really detailed perfectionism, right? And so it sounds like you've begun to let go of, kind of what I would call attachment to the outcome, right? Is you set it up as best you can, and if it slightly misses the mark, like it sounds like you really understand like that is the norm, right? And you seem to be more okay with it now.
Right. Even so, I guess focusing on the banquet, for example, that you attended for D4X last year, like I could have easily gone on like, this like, okay, like it's going to be like this. And like, we're going to have this speaker from this time to this time. And like, the food's going to arrive at this time and it's going to be on these stations. But I find it now, and I think this is a strategy that your audience could use too, is just have fun with it, right? Like part of the experience of like planning something is knowing that things are going to come up and like how you address them. Like for example, there was this one point where during the banquet, like some of the food was going to arrive like 30 minutes late. And, of course I had like this little freak out in my head, like, oh my God, like people are here and like it's dinner time, like they're going to be hungry. Like, what do we do? And so, I just, got up on stage and I was like, okay, the food will be here in 30 minutes. Like, but in the meantime, like, let's just readjust the schedule, which no one had a schedule. Like, they were just like here, like, but the schedule is in my head. And let's, have each of you talk to some of the students. Right. And so it was more of this, like, actually, just being in the moment and just not winging it necessarily, but just like things changed. How do I react to them and just make it still like seem like that was part of the plan, right? So I think just being more adaptive to change, and there's like EQ, emotional quotient, IQ, intelligent quotient, and then something that I learned from Andrew Patterson was AQ, or adaptability quotient. So like how do you react and adjust to change, because life is constantly changing. Like if you just stay the same, like you're gonna pretty much stay what's the word I'm looking for, stagnant, right? You need to be adaptable to change and to things that are just the world around you to get ahead. So I think just realizing that change is inevitable, and just plan to the best of your ability, but don't get stressed when the plan doesn't go exactly according to plan, because you can still figure out a way around it.
Yeah, great advice. I'm struggling a little bit with the itinerary that I had set up. Funnily enough, fittingly enough, and I'm trying to adapt actually like the questions that you had already answered, but I also want to keep them somewhat in order so the audience can easily track what they are. And so what I normally go through next is, we talk. I want to talk about a moment when you were afraid, and to me the one that stands out most is that period of time living in your car. And I know that it's sensitive, and so I don't want to press too hard on it. But what I do want to ask is, how did you get out of that? So anyone who's in a similar situation, like if you could just bullet point a few things, right, might find themselves feeling assisted with.
Like, how would I get myself out of like that feeling of like,
or when you were in living out of your car, right? What is a strategy anyone who might be in a similar situation, like what did you learn from that could help other people maybe reduce the amount of time they would spend in a similar situation?
I think for me, I always knew that it was going to be a temporary thing, not a permanent thing. And that small thing, as trivial as it seems, it would get me over like any hump that I was going through. Like, cause trust me, there were many days, sometimes several days in a row, where I was just like, it just felt like it would never end. And this feeling of just like intense hopelessness, like, and even if I knew that like there was a definite deadline, like, once this thing happens, or, once, I save up this much money, or once I do that, this will end. There was still this feeling of like, it won't. Right. And that point is still several years out or months out or weeks out. And just like the feeling of like counting down, like, oh my God, like I'm only halfway there. I'm only 3/4 of the way there. Like it was taxing. Right. But I think the thing that really helped me out of that was, again, just focusing on people. 'Cause there were many times where, it really messed with my psychology of like, I'm in this situation, I'm not deserving, right, of a nice meal, a place to sleep at. And like, of course I was, but like just being in that situation was so, it made me feel so unworthy and undeserving. And so like even reaching out to friends, like, hey, do you want to go hang out? Hey, do you want to like go get dinner? Hey, do you want to like, do something? It like, I somehow like, I don't know why, like there was this internal dialogue of like, no, you don't deserve to have fun. You don't deserve to have this nice, dinner with a friend. Like, and I think what helped me was, when friends would reach out to me, like that's when I realized like, oh wow, like, no, there are people who care about me. There are people who, whether they know about the situation I'm in or not, like they care about me as a person. They want to hang out. They want to spend time with me. And I think, there was this one period of time where I was going through really particularly rough phase. And, our friend Alejandro actually, he called me like 3 days in a row, 'cause he knew I was going through a really rough time. And, that meant so much to me, right? That he literally took like, and these weren't like 30-40 minute calls. It was just like 2-3 minutes. Like, hey buddy, how are you doing? Doing okay? Can I help you? And to have someone there, just know that like they care about you, would help me across that finish line. And again, I think just focusing more on just the people, right? The relationships that you have, is what'll get you across the finish line more than anything else. So I think if you're going through a similar like struggle or situation, like find people, like find your community, like, and it doesn't have to be like this formal group or anything. It's like, it can just be one person, or, a group of people, whether it's your family or friends or coworkers, like find that group of people and just be with them, right? Just, enjoy life with them, share those experiences with them. I think that'd be the biggest thing that I would say.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's, I just want to say, first of all, I think you're incredibly brave for opening up about that as much as you have. And, I hope that helps someone else. I think if that helps even one person who is going through something similar, then we've done something great here.
There we go. That's the goal.
And, now I also want to, take the other side of the coin, and I want to talk about a moment of great inspiration. And, generally where inspiration and when inspiration shows up in your life, and if there's a way to get at it, I kind of is what I'm getting at. Because again, I'm focusing on the audience here, and
Okay.
I want to see, is there a way to summon inspiration?
Ooh, that's a good one. I find that when I try to like summon inspiration, I can't do it. Like it just kind of comes when it comes. But I think like going back to the example of when Andrew Patterson, encouraged me, like, yeah, just go do it. Just start your thing. Like when you have that little light bulb moment of like, oh, there's this thing I can do. And like, I can go do it. Right. I think the best, like, inspiration is best when acted upon. Right. Because you can be inspired to do something and then you let, an hour pass or a day pass or 3 days pass. And then you're like, oh, I still want to do that. But where's the energy? Right. So I think for me, I'm much more focused on like inspiration coupled with execution rather than just getting at the inspiration. Because and I used to tell this to like when I would go to high schools all the time, like you can have the greatest idea. You can be like a living, breathing encyclopedia. You can be like Google embodied in like human form and like have all this knowledge and, inspiration and stuff. But if you don't actually do anything with it, like, is that really bringing value to the world, to other people? Right. So I think I'm much more execution focused, but like, to your question about like getting inspiration, like the moment you get inspiration for like whatever it is, like, it doesn't have to be like this huge, like, it came from heaven, God, whatever you want to call it, like, moment of like, aha, like, there's this thing. It's like, it's often like these little things that like build up to like a bigger like aha moment. And then just like take that little thing and just act upon it like immediately, right? Like take like 30 seconds or a minute. Like if you're like, oh wait, I can talk to this person. Like they might help me with this situation. Like go shoot that text, go shoot that email, like, and just get it going.
Yeah, this is great. So again, adapting here live. So you hit on another question I have in the future where I talk about two of my favorite words. Well, my first two favorite words are usually yes and. However, I have two other favorite words, and they're so what. And so you get a moment of inspiration, and then so what? What are you going to do with it, right?
Yeah.
You got to follow up with action. Life is not just a place of thought; it's also a place of acting. And so cool to hear you validate that and reflect that, right? So just to recap what was said, you can't summon inspiration, or at least that hasn't been the case for you. It hasn't been for me either. It's a bit of a trick question. And it just sort of happens. And, whether or not you think it's something from heaven, I tend to find that if you follow up on it, something good happens.
Right.
So cool. So I want to talk first about character traits and which ones you attribute to your success. And then as advice for the audience, how do you recognize your strengths and which ones come naturally and which ones do you have to develop?
Oh, okay. So let me start off with what I think some of my strengths are. And then do we talk about weaknesses at some point too? Because I think that's equally, if not even more important than strengths.
That'll be next.
Okay. I definitely think one of my strengths is just passion and excitement. And I think it's hard to, like, when people ask me like, oh, what are you passionate about? It's hard for me to like really pinpoint sometimes. Like I'll just randomly get excited about certain things. And I think over my life, I've realized that like I don't have one specific passion that I can point to. It's just like you were mentioning earlier, like sometimes it's just like this one thing that builds on top of another. But I think, the example of like me, being passionate about like, serving others and like, that showed to like the Microsoft recruiter who then like wanted me to interview, or like the story that I shared at ChargePoint about, my road trip to the Florida Keys in like an EV, or, at Apple, showing them like, this is when I dressed up as an iPhone for Halloween one year, like just like I literally did that, just like being really like, do the things that like get you really excited. Cause for some of our students in D4X too, they get asked the question a lot, like, what do you want to do when you grow up, Johnny? And, they're like, I don't know. It's like, you don't need to know exactly what you want to do. Just, keep following the things that excite you and that make you like happy. Through that period, you'll find things that you don't like and that don't make you happy. And like, those are clearly like, they might even be part of that passion. Like, the job that I do, regardless of what company it's at, there are moments where I'm like, this is so cool. I get to see how things are made. And there's moments where it's like, oh, I don't want to sit in front of the computer anymore. This is so boring and tedious. But I think just doing things that are exciting to you, things will naturally find their course. I think for me, the example of, taking 10 years to go from I want to work at Apple to finally working at Apple, like I could have had like the perfect plan in place of like, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to get hired, and then all this stuff. But it didn't happen that way. But that passion of that long-term passion of like, I like Apple and I like their products and I like the perfectionism and I like the attention to detail and like, let me dress up as an iPhone for, Halloween one year. Like that was consistent over the long term. And I think that phrase, like consistency over the long term, is what will get you where you want to go. You might not know when or how, but as long as something is consistently done over the long term, like it'll get you there. So I think that's a piece of advice that I would give your audience. Like things take time. Like if you want to start your own company, if you want to, do a podcast, like, question for you is, did you wake up one day and like, I want to do a podcast, and you had all your equipment and everything and, all your guests and everything ready to go?
Dude, it was a process.
Exactly.
Let me tell you that. This took it's been about 6 months actually. Yeah. Since I had the idea. Yeah.
So it takes time, right? But it's this process, right? And you don't rush it, like enjoy it.
Yeah. And it'll be messy. Mistakes will be made.
Very messy. Yep.
And yeah, you learn as you go. Great. So passion would be the key character trait. And that was just something that you found naturally, you're saying, right, is what excited you, and you just pursued that. And, as kind of tropey as it is being like an Apple fanboy, I feel it from you. That energy is real.
Yeah.
Like you love that stuff, and that's great. Like, you got this attention to detail. It meets your pizza topping criterion. That's what you're doing. So the takeaway is, from this conversation, at least the takeaway is, find what you're passionate about. What you're passionate about is what excites you. And then as you go through the process of pursuing that, understand that it's going to take a while. There's going to be some missteps here or there. You're going to eat the wrong flavor pizza at Microsoft, right? You're going to bounce around a bit. But, and even tying back to your story of your time spent in your car, that, you always had this feeling of this is temporary, right? Of knowing, trusting yourself and trusting life, and that you'll be able to get out of it and do the thing that excites you. So it also sounds like to me, if I could just add what I've intuited, is that there is almost like a faith in you, a faith that you have that you can achieve it, and that life will be able to provide that thing for you as well, right? This faith that, hey, this is temporary, even though it feels like or felt like it was going on forever, right? You still had this feeling deep down. And to me, I think that's really important for people to have, because even when it does feel hopeless at times, like, what, you might not have anything else to rest your head on, but that faith in yourself,
right.
and others, right? So I want to call that out as another trait that I see in you that contributed to your success, as well as it seems like deep conscientiousness and diligence, right? Like, perfectionism to me is like the far end of the spectrum of diligence taken, to the extreme, right?
Yeah.
So you're a hard worker. You're also extremely compassionate. Like, I can feel that in you.
Oh, thank you.
And that showed in your story with the recruiter as well. So, and that to me also feels like it comes naturally to you. And maybe that was part of your upbringing too. So I just want to highlight these traits for people, right? If you don't think it's important to be, caring about other people, right? Maybe it's not for you, but I want to highlight that it's working for you. As well as being a hard worker and executing on inspiration that you find. So I think there's many traits here. But I do want to keep this moving as well. So I want to talk about, discovering your shortcomings or flaws and how you address them.
Oh, I have so many. I would not be human if I did not have flaws. I think I talked about perfectionism a little bit. I think I can be very impatient sometimes, honestly. And like, as much as I can say, like, yeah, like, things take time, and like, this is temporary. I bring a lot of anxiety onto myself and stress onto myself that I don't really need to. So like, for example, like, the whole, buying my parents the house thing, which, I was finally able to do back in October.
Whoa.
It was like,
dude.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. And it was this huge moment for me of like, just relief, like, oh my God, like, I did it, but that whole, like, 3 years or so leading up to it, it was just like, I need it done now. And it was just like so stressful and anxiety inducing. And like, it's not today. It's going to be like, it's still like 2 years from now. It's just like, feeling like, Josh, calm down. Like, time is going to pass whether you like it or not. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, you're already doing the right things. You're putting in place the right things. You're like saving up enough. Like, it's going to happen. Just be patient. Right. So I can be very impatient in the short term, but when you look back in the long term, it's like, oh wow, you must have been like so patient during that entire process. Like, no, I was not. Right. So I think, I bring a lot of like just stress onto myself that I sometimes don't need to. So I think for your audience, it's just, again, just keep that long-term vision in mind and stay occupied with other things. Cause if you're just thinking about that one thing and when it's going to happen, like your mind will get consumed with it. And you can use that in a positive way, but at least for me, if I spend any time, a long period of time, like focusing on something, like, it's usually really detrimental. Like I focus so much on that thing that it's just like, that is the only thing that matters. And like, if I don't do this like right now or get it done by the end of the day, like the world will be over. And like, that's not the case.
Right. True. And that was one specific instance of a shortcoming. I also want to ask, how generally do you discover that, I'm impatient, and then how do you go about addressing these things, generally speaking, right?
I think it's two two ways that I discover it. One is if someone tells me like, you not necessarily like you have this problem or you have this issue, or like, you might want to consider working on this, or you seem kind of impatient, or you like you seem to drop the ball on these things sometimes, or whatever it is. I actually really appreciate feedback, because like it lets me know, okay, like I'm a human being, like I'm not perfect, but there's these things that like I can actually work on to be better. And I'll share a quick example. When I was in high school, like I was very shy, very introverted, and like I wanted to, like I knew that was a shortcoming of mine, because I wanted to be like the other students that would just like socialize and do things and like not just be to themselves all the time. And so, it's like, okay, how do I get past this? How do I get outside my shell? Like, okay, well, I could, do speech competitions, and like, it's rewarding, and like I can build a skill, and like, at the end of the day, like, I might even like win a prize, or, a scholarship or grant or whatnot. So I think, that was something where it's, two things. One, like people would tell me like, you're so quiet, like you're so shy, you're so like reticent, like, but you're very smart, you're very capable, like share your ideas with other people, like, do things like, you have the capability, like don't just keep it to yourself. So other people telling me, but also if something causes me a lot of like stress or anxiety, that's usually the sign that like, Josh, you're doing something wrong. Like it's not normal. Well, it is normal, but like, it's not normal to feel anxious or stressed out about something all the time, right? Like do something to fix it. So, talking to a therapist actually has helped me a lot. And it's something that culturally for me, I was really uncomfortable doing at first, because I think at least in Hispanic culture, talking to someone or a therapist is usually like, that's what crazy people do, right? So I struggled for a long time to convince myself like, no, it's okay. Like this is for you. Like they're there to help you. They're there to like literally listen to you and help provide actionable guidance for you. And my therapist actually has helped me a lot of like, here's a strategy you can use. Like, for example, with like the anxiety thing that I struggle with, he taught me HALT. Like if you're stressed or anxious, it's usually one of four things. Like H, you're hungry, A, you're angry, L, you're lonely, or T, you're tired. And like literally if I feel stressed or anxious, I'm just like, okay, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And it's like, okay, I'm really hungry right now. I should probably eat something, right? And these things were like, I'll be working late at night at work sometimes, and it's like, and I'm hungry, and I know I'm hungry, and I'm like, no, but if I just finish this, and then 30 minutes pass, an hour passes, hour and a half passes, and it's like, then my productivity goes downhill because I'm hungry, and it's like, Josh, go take 5-10 minutes, get a bowl of cereal or something, just eat something, and then you'll be in a better place. So I think like that's helped me so much, and I hope it helps people in your audience too. Like just basic fundamentals. Like if something is causing you anxiety, like you can usually pinpoint it to like one little thing that you can do something about that usually takes like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to fix.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I only learned recently that I myself get anxious.
Anxious.
Yeah, and it's a game changer to notice that. Like it's not anxious about that thing. It's anxious about, it's your body saying like, dude, you forgot about me.
Yeah. So listen to your body. Like,
how do you recover from feeling down or looking for excuses?
How do I recover from looking for, what do you mean by looking for excuses?
Like say like do you ever find yourself in a situation where like, what you need to do, but then you just keep finding yourself like procrastinating or like making excuses for like, well, maybe I shouldn't do it because I got to go, fry a banana. Like,
Oh no, I want fried bananas. Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, how do you recover from like looking for excuses?
I find that getting other people involved helps me get out of any rut that I'm in. Like for example, Alejandro is a great friend, and he'll sometimes offer to like host a D4X working session at his place. And our whole team actually, I don't know if I mentioned this, works remotely. So some of our team, like Alejandro, is here in San Francisco. I'm in South Bay. Jason used to be in Seattle. Like we had our whole team dispersed, and so like we don't actually meet in person very often. A lot of it's done virtually. But even like a working session in person at someone's place, it's like we've been talking about updating the website for like 4 months, and we haven't done anything about it. Like, but actually getting in person and like literally like being like, oh, okay, like let's move this here, like let's do that, like let's put this picture here, and like actually doing it together is so effective. Versus like, I can know in my mind like I need to update the website, I need to put these new pictures up, I need to like update the testimonials, I need to like put the application form up, but I get bogged down with like all the other billion things that I have to do. And everyone's got a billion things to do, but when people all with a billion things to do get together to focus on one thing to do, that is the one thing to do, right? And just being very present and working with people. So it's something that I still struggle with, but like if I find myself in a rut now, it's just like time. Where do I put the time in my calendar to do this? And ideally do it with someone else, right? Because like even going to the gym, like I personally struggle with going to the gym, but I have a friend who like, she's like, okay, Mondays and Wednesdays at this time, we're going to meet here and like, we're going to do the gym. And like, it's like, okay, that is our time to go to the gym, right? Like doing like a buddy system or something like
right.
is so effective, at least for me.
So it sounds like carving out time, setting that aside and saying, this is going to happen then, and then having some system of like accountability.
Exactly. Yeah.
With friends. Great. The first question I usually start with is, where are you on your journey and are we there yet? Like, do you have a destination in mind? But we kind of already addressed at the beginning where you said, destined for X literally is this ever-changing variable. X marks the spot on the map, but it's moving.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know did I summarize it well enough, or do you have anything you want to add to the fact that your destination is constantly changing?
No, I think that's pretty accurate, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. The next question I want to ask is, do you always feel like you're on the right path?
No.
Okay.
I sometimes will feel like I am, and then I'll be like, oh, that was a bad decision I made. Why did I do that? But like, it's like yes and no. Like, yes, I feel like I'm on the right path because and it's always when I reflect back on it that I'm like, oh, okay, that actually was the right path. Like maybe while I was on it in the moment, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like, this is kind of scary. Like, what am I doing again? Why am I doing this? And then, I look back and it's like, oh, actually it's really good that happened, because it then led to this thing, which led to me meeting this person, which then led to this really crappy situation, which then taught me this, which then went to like this other thing. So yeah, I think it's been very helpful to just reflect back and say, oh, okay, like everything happened for a reason.
That's interesting to see. So you've got moments where you're like, damn, I do not feel like I'm on the path. But then you look back and you're like, oh, that was totally part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess the message to the audience is it's completely normal to feel that way.
Yeah.
Even though you might have the knowledge now of, historically, every time I look back, I realize that time I felt I was off the path was me actually on it, but you still feel like you're off it.
Exactly, because it's not that perfect prescribed path.
Right, yeah. Right, which is such a funny, human thing to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you feel like you're lost, if you feel like you're off the path, know two things. Number one, you're normal for feeling that. Yeah. That is okay. There's nothing wrong with you. And number two, looking back, you'll probably realize like, oh shit, that was part of the path, and I learned something out of this. So maybe that will give some hope for those feeling lost, that maybe you're not really lost after all.
Yeah. Actually, on the point of learning too, one of our students in D4X, our second year actually, she said this quote that I forget who said it, but it's stuck with me ever since. She said, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Because, we can go through our whole lives experiencing lots of things, but it's really when we look back and we're like, oh, that relationship I was in, or that job that, I didn't really like, or that, club that I really enjoyed being a part of. Like, when you reflect on that, it's like, oh, like things start to click, right? But if you just go through life experiencing, without reflecting, it's like, I'm just doing things. And you don't really have that time to say like, why am I doing this? Like, if I did that in the past and I didn't like it, why am I doing it again? Or that was really awesome. Like, let me do more of that.
This ties into another question I want to get to, which is, where and how do you find meaning? And it sounds like this is through reflection. As you look back on that event and you say, what did that actually mean for me?
Yeah.
Right? How does that apply to me actually? Right? Because in the moment, you might not process that. because if you continue doing, and you don't sit there and let it integrate and process, then, well, you might have missed something.
Right.
You don't fully know what it means to you, and it takes time to look back and say, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
So that's really cool, and it's so cool that your student actually told you that.
Yeah, we think that like we're gonna bring them and like they're gonna learn so much from us and the other people, but like we learn so much from them too, and like that's really I think what we're after. It's like getting a bunch of like really passionate people together in a room or whatnot, and just sharing and learning from each other.
That's phenomenal. That's so cool. Yeah, it shows something is up with our assumptions. Like, oh, we don't have anything to learn from kids. We'll just teach them.
Yeah.
And then they come in, they're like, dude, here's what's up.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like, whoa, okay.
And it's really validating for them too. Like, wait, I taught someone who's 26 years old something. Like, then they start believing like, oh wow, like my ideas like actually have meaning for other people that aren't just younger than me, but like I can like teach older people things too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a two-way street, man.
Yeah.
Which is such a good feeling too, to know that you're not confined by this one way of thinking that's common to us, I guess.
Right.
Life's got this additional richness to it that we're not necessarily aware of, and at least to me that's inspiring.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, kids. Good shit, guys. So we are here to guide lost souls, and we just discussed a bit of when you feel lost and how feeling lost actually could be part of you finding yourself.
Oh, it definitely
in the longer run. So now I want to focus on, when do you feel most found?
Ooh. So I think that's a very interesting question. I think, and when I first saw the question, I interpreted it multiple ways, like, because I think you can kind of find yourself, right? I think that's the phrase most people are familiar with. But also I think part of like being found is other people finding you. And it's not like one or the other. It's this combination of like, for example, for me, I felt like I was finding myself as I was going through this experience, these past, 4 years, especially, of like, oh, okay, like what kind of job do I want? What do I want? How do I find meaning and fulfillment out of the value I create for the world? And, part of that is through Destined for X and what we do with our students there. And I was discovering this stuff, not on my own, but like it was a lot of internal reflection that I was doing. But part of that also is people finding me and saying, Josh, like, you're really passionate, you're really excited, like, why don't you do this? And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I do like doing this. Why don't I do this, full time or spend more time on it? Or like, why are you doing this thing that clearly does not bring you joy? In fact, it gives you a lot of anxiety and stress and you don't like it at all. So why are you doing this? And it's like, oh yeah, that's a good point. So I think I feel most found when it's like this combination of, people just being very frank and honest with me. And again, like, I really appreciate feedback, and I can sometimes, very oftentimes, be very knuckleheaded, and it'll take, 3-4 friends over the course of like 6 months telling me like, Josh, stop doing this thing. It's clearly making you very unhappy. Like, why are you doing it? It's like, oh no, like, I'm learning so much from this experience, and like, this person's great, and this job is great, and it's like, that meme of like the dog in like the burning house, like, this is fine, this is fine,
Yep.
And it's like, no, Josh, you're in a house that's burning. This is not fine. Like, get out of the house. So yeah, it's a combination of people just being very honest with me, and also just me doing like, I feel like I sometimes overanalyze everything, like, what does it mean that I'm doing this interview right now? What does it mean that like I have to drive back to San Francisco or drive down to South Bay? Like, why do we have different types of cars? Like, why do we, like everything, like everything is like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Like, why am I doing Destined for X? Why 8 students? Why not 26? Why not 1,000? Wait, if I do 1,000, like, does that detract from the value? Like, why? I'm constantly asking myself this, and I think that's why sometimes I have so much anxiety. It's like, I don't just take things at face value. Like, I have to dissect and break down everything to like a very fundamental level, which is good, but also bad when I take it to the extreme of like, because there were times where I'm just like, nothing matters, like, life is meaningless, like, this is so pointless, like, but at the same time, it's like, I still think that, but the exciting part, like that can be a very depressing thought, but the exciting part is you bring meaning to your life, right? And you get to decide, you shape your journey of like, this excites me, this makes me excited, this makes me happy, and I get to do it. I don't have to do it, I get to do it, right? And I also get to say, no, I don't want to do this. This is not good for me. This is not making me happy. I don't want this in my life, right? And I think that's where it's tough for a lot of people, and for me too, to just say, as much as like, you said like yes, and sometimes it just takes a hard no. Like, no, this does not bring me joy. No, this does not bring me value. Like, and I think there's a saying, or Steve Jobs or someone said it, that, for every 1,000 or for every yes, there's 1,000 no's. And sometimes the no's are much more important than that one yes, because it allows you to focus.
Yeah. Set boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to recap, it's, you're talking about others finding you and helping them build your sense of, help you, assist you in building your sense of identity, right? And that it's as important as it is to say yes to some things, it's also important to say no and set boundaries. And that reminds me of your story at the Michelin star restaurant, where it's like, no, this isn't for me, right? And you can clearly say no, even though it sounded like your friend was kind of pushing it on you, right? And that can be hard when a friend is doing that too, right? It's really hard to say no to friends sometimes.
Right.
Especially as it sounds like you're the type of guy to drop everything, like you said, and like go do the helpful thing instead of the thing you need to be doing, right? But so it's like there's this process of yes to this and no to that helps build up you, and that's when you start to know yourself and you feel found.
Right. Yeah, it's very, very reflective experience. Again, like I don't think I would know so much about myself if I didn't reflect on, like, sometimes obsessively reflect over everything.
I feel that too, and I have a lot of thoughts about why we drive different cars and all these things as well. I find it. I'm just curious about these things, but I do feel you, and I want to say this for other audience members too. If you're a overthinker, overanalyzer, know that you don't have to be necessarily, right. That word "over" is what now makes it a negative connotation, right? So if you can rein that in a bit and catch yourself doing it in the moment, be like, wait, do I really need to know this? Do I just want to know it?
Yeah.
Right? Is there something else I should be doing instead? I'll probably go do that.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to this later. It then becomes a question of prioritization and how do I want to spend my mental bandwidth? And for me, what it takes is, should I really be looking at this random thing on Wikipedia right now? Right? Like, do I need to know how that works? Right? And it can be fun sometimes. And like, I think it also changes when you approach it with a sense of fun and curiosity. It's
right.
Like, I wonder why that, rather than I need to know, right?
Right now.
Exactly.
In these next 2 minutes.
Exactly. There's a perspective shift, because then you can, if you're playing with it, then you're okay with letting it go. Right?
Yeah.
Right? You're not gripping it like, I gotta have this thing, and if I don't have this thing, I'm gonna freak out. Like there's a lightness of touch to it.
Yeah.
Right? And that tends to make things more fun in general. Right? So it's if you want to look at it from like a personality trait perspective, it's like taking that controlling aspect of you and turning it into more of a playful aspect.
I like that. Yeah.
And when you're playing a game, you care about the game, right? Like no one likes playing a game where the players don't care. That's a bullshit game.
Yeah.
It's boring, right? So you got to get into it, but at the end of the day, recognize it's still a game, and you're here to have fun with the game. You're not, some people are here to win the game and crush the other team. But like for me, I'm playing a game to have fun.
Right.
Right. And that's for me how I look at the analytical side of me, right? It's a game, and it's a game that actually can be played pretty much ad infinitum, right? Because you can, if you play the why game, you end up at the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you're like, where do I go from here?
Yeah. So it's understand when to stop and when to do something else. And for me, it's doing so through checking myself and checking in with, how do I feel about this thing? Is it exciting me, or is it bringing me anxiety? Right. And if so, wait, is this necessary anxiety? Right. Like, oh no, I'm learning about dishwashers. Like, wait, hold on.
Cool. But what?
Yeah, but not relevant to other things. So yeah, check yourself before you wreck yourself. I want to talk about fulfillment next, and we touched on this a few times in relation to serving yourself and others as well. That's already been touched on, but I just want to quickly address the question: where do you find fulfillment in your life? having had both these jobs. You got this job in tech. It's the thing you always dreamed of since 10 years ago. You know, you dressed up as an iPhone and now you're here. And then you also are doing this nonprofit Destined for X, where you're mentoring kids who are from these, you know, historically underprivileged communities, and you're getting them to where they need to go. Like, to me, that sounds like, dude, you're doing it. So where are you drawing your fulfillment from, and is it stacking up to your expectations?
Yeah. I think the way that I've approached a lot of it is just like, what do I want and how can I share it with others? And this is something like going back to the idea of like being found. Like I remember one time when like the very first year that I was doing Destined for X, when I posted about it on Facebook, and, you know, one of my high school teachers commented on that post saying, what's awesome about you, Josh, is that it's not just about like, yes, you're very ambitious and motivated and you go and achieve all these things. It's that once you do, you share them with other people. You share these gifts with other people. And that really resonated with me because it's like, oh, interesting. Like and that's a theme I think that after I saw that, I was like, oh, I actually do tend to do that. And for me, I think it's like, I recognize that I came into this life with nothing. Right. And, you know, when I die, I will have nothing also. It will just be a sum of like all the things I did, the people that I touched, you know, I won't get to take like the nice car thing with me. It's just like, you know, just that when I think about legacy, it's, you know, and Destined for X in particular, it's not just what is my legacy, but, you know, the people that have touched me the most, you know, my parents is, you know, they've had this legacy on me, and not just on me, but on all the people that I've touched through D4X. And, you know, for them to come to, you know, the banquet and meet all of the people that like, you know, they created me, and like, you know, for them to know, wow, like Josh, you know, our son has done all these things, but look at all the people that he's helping, you know, through all of his achievements. I think for me, that brings a lot of fulfillment, because it's not just about, yeah, I went to Stanford. Yeah, I work at Apple, and I'm this awesome, you know, hot shot, you know, like I'm untouchable kind of a person. Like I still try to be as humble as possible and realize that like, yeah, like I have this job at Apple, but a month from now I might not. Right. And so the things that like when I had my Model S and I got in an accident last month where a drunk driver hit my car, and thankfully like I'm fine and, you know, going to physical therapy, but that car was gone. It got totaled. And you know, that really shifted gears for me in terms of like, oh my God, like there are things in my life right now that I'm doing that are not adding value to my life, that are causing me a lot of stress and anxiety and general unhappiness. And the moment that car accident happened, I literally just broke them off and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. So I think fulfillment for me is just, again, going back to the no's and the yeses, like getting rid of the things that are just definite no's and adding more yeses. And, you know, the gifts that I have, like, you know, that first year of Destined for X, I was like, I have this car and like, it's really awesome and I'm really excited about it. All right, kids, like, because some of them had never even seen or been in a Tesla. And, you know, I was, you know, showing them the touch screen and everything. And they were like, wow, this is so cool. Like, this is the future. And, you know, I took them for like a little ride and like, you know, I slammed on the accelerator, you know, safely, of course. And they're like, wow, this is so cool. This is so awesome. So like, you know, and, you know, even, you know, when I was working at Microsoft, like, again, going back to the privilege that I had there, it's, you know, I talked to my manager and, you know, our director and like, you know, can we bring some of these kids here and do a demo of HoloLens for them? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, we'll get them like a nice lunch and everything with like steak and chicken. And it was just like, wow, like that's more than I could possibly imagine. And, you know, the kids came in and they're like, this is so cool. Right. So I think a lot of my fulfillment comes from, I have things that I want to achieve in my life, and how can I, you know, not just achieve them for myself, but how can I share them with other people? And like, you know, not just the people on the periphery, but the people that have been a part of that journey, like bring them along. Like with D4X, I love, you know, inviting my past coworkers, my friends, like people that have been a part of my journey who maybe not even necessarily like volunteer with us, but they've been a part of my journey. Right. And I want to thank them for that. And, you know, bringing them into that experience, I think is the best way to do so.
I hear a few things there. I hear, you know, working backwards, you know, you're sharing these experiences in such a way that they inspire people, right? That's what I see in the Tesla story. It's like, hey, look, here's what's possible even. Let's reset the bar for what you thought was even doable in this world, right? Feel this, it's a rocket ship, right? Yeah. like for me, the first time I was in a fast car, and I'm a car guy, right?
Yeah.
It reset the bar for what I thought was physically possible to do, right? On four wheels. I was like, no fucking way.
Yeah.
That, like, I felt like I entered another dimension. and that can give people the sense of inspiration of like, wow, you can reach super high because like this is what you can do. And then what I also heard that I want to highlight is this question of, well, I'm going to rephrase real quick, but what will I care about on my deathbed? Is it going to be my Tesla? Fuck no.
Yeah.
Right. That was nice and cool, but not the real deal. Like what matters most to me. Right. I think that's a great like litmus test for people is what am I going to care about as I am, finally leaving this world.
Yeah.
Right. Is it going to be like, I wish I saved $500 more or made that, whatever position, or is it going to be like, who are the lives I've touched?
Right.
Right. And how did I touch them? And did I lift other people up along with me? And I'm getting goosebumps as I say this, partially because that's part of the intent of this podcast. Is I finally feel like I've hit a place where I can start giving back and through the form of other people as well.
Yeah.
Right. Because these are stories that you don't hear on traditional media. And, not to make it about me, but I want to highlight the importance of getting these out there, like your genuineness and you hitting these hard questions head on and saying, this is what I'm going to care about when I'm old and dying, right? Not the stuff we're told to care about, which is the creme brulee torch.
Yeah.
Right. Or the Model S, right?
Yeah.
Those are nice things, but they're only things. And what seems to matter most is that ability to lift others up.
Right.
And, I also think that's kind of like that's what a family does, right? When I would assume I'm not one yet, but when you're a parent, what I see in your parents and ours, or in mine, is that they are willingly sacrificing certain things, some of these nice physical things, in order to help you achieve, in order to lift you up.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so funny that we have this trend in society now where it's like, oh, you don't need kids, right? If you have kids, you lose your life, right? But when you ask someone who has a kid, they're like, would you do it again? They're like, yeah, I did.
I did it multiple times.
Yeah, it's like but you lost all that freedom. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, but it was worth it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, and I think that even if you can't have kids, right? I just want to take that extreme case and say, it is the fact that helping other people is much more fulfilling than having the stuff.
Yeah.
I like nice stuff. Like I live in a nice apartment because I like it. But I'm finding much more joy from doing this
Right.
as well. So I just want to, put that out there for people. And this ties into the service to self versus service to others question, right? Which is, we mentioned earlier, you can't over-index on service to others because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't try. You will kill yourself and others in the process. But at the end of the day, you can't over-index on serving yourself, right? Like you're not going to get true fulfillment from just doing you, living that rock star lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. So
it becomes very empty because it's not. And actually, funnily enough, I was reading a book last night and it mentioned, I think it was like Into the Wild, like the guy that like went out into the wilderness and like was like, I'm going to be super independent and like just like live life on my own terms and like, live off the land and whatnot. And on like day 2 or so before, his death, because he ran out of food or something, he mentioned like happiness is best shared. Or happiness occurs when you share with other people, something along those lines. And it's like, oh yeah, that's such a good point. Cause you can have all these nice things or these experiences, but if you don't share them with someone else and, whether it's a significant other or friends or family or whatnot, it feels very empty, even if it is a good experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It amplifies it.
Yeah.
When you can bring that to other people. And then like, we have this cool like multiplicity effect when we do that stuff. Cause it's like, or like butterfly effect actually with these people because it's like, oh, you give them that experience and then maybe that inspires them to do something else and then like that also lifts everyone else around them up.
Yeah.
And like that's how communities work generally speaking, right? So anyway, I think that's so cool that you recognize that and you embody that as well. And so I just want to recognize you for all you're doing because I think that is just impossibly inspiring and I admire you in so many ways for doing that and for calling it out in a world that is generally focused on the opposite. So, dude, good shit.
Oh, thank you. You as well. I mean, I think this podcast is amazing, right? And like we mentioned earlier, I think if it helps even just one person, like it's so worth it. But I'm pretty sure it's going to impact way, way more than that. So.
Fingers crossed, man. So we're nearly at the end. I know it's been a while. We went off on a lot of stories, but I really enjoyed them and they gave me a better sense of who you are, and I hope it gives the audience a better sense as well. So we talked about intention and service to self and others, and which is more rewarding already. I want to talk about motivation next, because I think this is an area where a lot of people might struggle, myself sometimes as well.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, what gets you out of bed every morning?
Ooh. So a good contrasting experience, like up until a couple of months ago, it was like I get up because, and very like I was hesitant to get up, honestly, because I'm just like, I have to go to work, I have to do all these things, and it's like things that I had to do versus like, again, things that I want and get to do. And so I think now, like literally the moment that like I shifted gears into like, moving into my new place in Cupertino and like having my job at Apple, I'm like, I literally can't wait to get up the next morning. Like and it's weird because like it feels like what I do day to day is still so very similar. It's like who I'm doing it with, where I'm doing it, like, the impact that it has, that it is so different. Right. And so I think that intrinsically ties into like it, the motivation comes from the passion, right? Of like, oh, I've known I've wanted to do this my whole life and now I get to do it. Right. So I think the moment you shift gears into like learning, and again, this takes time and reflection and experience of like, but the time that it takes for you to recognize like what you like and what you're passionate about, it's like now it's like you don't even need to like get yourself going. It just happens, right? And I think the motivation is it just comes from the passion, which again just comes from experience. Like I don't have a very good answer to that, but I think it's actually, no, I do have an answer. It's that X. It's always like humans are very weird in that like it's like I want that thing, and then once we do that thing, we want another thing, and then once we do that thing, we do another thing, right? And so that the X is constantly shifting, and I think us having some kind of a North Star guiding us is so important, because without it, it's like, why am I doing this? Like, and why I struggled a lot was like, okay, like I struggle with taking vacations, for example, because I'm just like, I'm here to work. I am robot, right? Versus like, no, like take time, enjoy yourself, like go take a vacation, right? And it's like, without like, I literally just recently, and I don't know why it took me so long, I literally have a budget now for vacation, right? Like, so like literally, going back to the idea of like, like put aside time and, people to do it with. It's like, also sometimes things take money, right? So like now I literally like am forcing myself to be like, this money is for vacation, take vacation. This is okay. This is what it is for, right? Like, so I think, having some kind of a North Star, whether it's like, saving up for a vacation or like, for D4X, sometimes, the first couple of years I struggled a lot with motivating my team, because we were like, are we just going to do 8 students again? Or are we going to like change the curriculum? Like, what are we doing? And like, I struggle, like, what is our North Star? Like, are we going to try to do like 1,000 students next year? Like, can we even do that? Do we do like an online thing? Do we do like a just fully in person? Do we do like a hybrid model thing? Like, what is our North Star? And so without that, like I actually lost a lot of people on my team, because they were like, we don't know what we're doing. And like, I just feel like we're going round and round in circles. Right. So that North Star is hugely, hugely important, not just for our own lives, but, when we're leading teams, of like, this is what we're going to do. And we might be right. We might be wrong, but at least we're going to learn from it. And we know exactly what we're moving towards for now. Right. That goal might change, but we know that this is what we're going for.
Yeah. So goal setting, and what that also would relate to in the kind of more spiritual community is intention setting. The same thing, like, what are we doing here? You got to set a goal, set an intention, and that's what you move towards. Fantastic. Have you heard of the concept of flow?
Yes.
Awesome.
I wish I could get in it more.
Well, so that's my next question for you is, where do you find yourself dropping into a flow state? Or I guess, first of all, how would you define what a flow state feels like for people who might be unfamiliar?
I think for me, getting into flow is just like, I can tune everything else out and just laser focus on the thing I'm working on. And it's not a laser focus of like, I have to do this and I am doing this. It's like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I can't imagine doing anything else other than the thing that I'm doing right now, because this is so exciting and so interesting. Right. And I think, for me, it's hard. It's really hard, honestly, getting into that state, whether it's writing an essay or, creating a presentation for work or, designing 3D components in CAD software. But, the moment that, and I started jotting down things in my phone of like things that help me get into flow. And I'm like, okay, I need to have this music. I need to be in this kind of setting. Like my room needs to be like small and enclosed. I can't work in like, a very big space because I feel like things are distracting or people are going to be walking around me. Like the lighting's got to be like this, like little details, right? Like, and I think for me, flow, I've learned to take it down to like, again, just basic fundamentals. Like our whole experience is built upon like our five senses. So like if I want to get in flow, like what do I need to see? What do I need to hear? What do I need to like, taste or touch, or like, what is the environment that I need to create for myself? And that's being very cognizant of that and really shaping that experience is what helps me get into flow, and I'm still working on it. I can't completely 100% guarantee it, but at least I know that like, okay, now actually like, yeah, working in a big office is not going to help me get in flow. I need to be like in my room or like in a very small enclosed space so I can focus.
Minimal distractions.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so, that answered my next question, which is like, what is your process to slip into it? And it sounds like crafting your environment in such a way that it allows you to better focus.
Yeah.
Which just is so contradictory to our typical like open office setup.
I know.
In work now, which is kind of funny. But I don't want to rabbit hole into that. But okay, so that's cool. So defining flow as deep focus and doing just the thing you're doing, not even thinking about the fact that you're doing it, but just doing it. And then the process to make it easier to slip into it is to set up your environment in such a way that it minimizes distractions. And I know you mentioned the five senses, but I don't imagine you sitting there like, I need 3 strawberries, 1 banana, and like, you
would be surprised. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe. So there's the steps. It's basically this laser focus. You become kind of one with the activity you're doing and set up your environment in such a way that's conducive to it. And with a focus on your 5 senses and where they need to be. And maybe you do thrive in an open office setting.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
But
some people do.
Just recognizing that. Cool. And I want to, as we're wrapping up the meaning and fulfillment section, I want to ask, because many people find their meaning and fulfillment in this, are you religious or spiritual?
So interestingly enough, I grew up Catholic. My parents would, take me to like, catechism, and I got my first communion and, all that other stuff. And, we would go to church every single weekend without fail. And when I was at Stanford, they would, when I would call them, every single week, like, did you go to church? Did you go to church? Did you go to church? And it's like, yes, of course. And like, I think I've always like that my Catholic upbringing like really shaped a lot of, service and focus on others. And, when I was at Stanford, I didn't just go to church. I was like, one of the people that would help, set up and like, take stuff down and, whatnot during service. But after graduation, I think as I was going through a lot of these experiences and figuring out like, who do I want to be? Like, who am I? Like, where do I want to go? Like, what's important to me? I actually let go of my Catholicism and, going to church. And I realized like, well, what about that experience actually like, do I feel made me a better person? And was it the going to church part? Was it the like, donating money? Was it the like, being just the being part of like being a good person or trying to be a good person? And, again, just like condensing it down to like the fundamentals, like what did I consider that to be? And, now I don't consider myself religious, but I do consider myself spiritual. And so, when I talk about, creating, experiences for people or, sharing things with people, it's like, I think that's what my spiritual sense is really about. Like, how do I as a human being or soul or, whatever you want to call it, help other people, because other people are lost and anxious and, scared and nervous, and, they're human beings too. And how do we help each other on this journey? Right. So I think that's been my kind of spiritual, sense, so to speak, of like, how I approach, that spiritual realm.
Very cool. Yeah. I want to bring up an interesting concept. This relates to your sense of spirituality, I guess, and helping others. And it's a question of, who are you really? And I want to give one theory that is, you're not just you. You are the people around you. You've heard the phrase like, you are the sum of your 5 best friends. Yeah. Right. So then I want to extend that to family, and then your closest friends. Right. And you can see that. You can see your personality shift as you become close with someone. You absorb traits of theirs that you like or want to absorb, or sometimes ones you don't, but subconsciously, right? and vice versa. And it becomes this interesting, energetic or spiritual exchange, you might say, because it's personality things that are shifting, not physical attributes. Unless maybe you get the same piercing or tattoo, but generally speaking, it's these more subtle attributes of a person, right, that are shifting, and the more I think you can accept that reality and do that thing we were talking about earlier of lifting them up along with you, it becomes this cool like all-win situation.
Yeah.
Right, like everyone benefits from it.
Yeah.
And so, not to plug spirituality too hard, but I just want, people to really notice like whether or not you absorb the traits of people who are close to you, because I think the answer is unequivocally yes, you do.
Yeah.
And notice like, wait, what does that do to my sense of identity? Right? Am I just me now? I learned all these things from like my parents, my family, my kid, like whoever, right? Your kids, D for X, right? They all rub off on you in some way. And so like, to what extent am I also them? Are they also me? And so then this service to self and others line almost gets blurred a bit, right?
Right.
Because you're like, wait a second, we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Right. And so let's do something that benefits everybody. So we touched on, we're going to move to the very last section. I know we're almost done. This has been quite a long interview. They're normally not this long. I've only had one other one this long. But we talked about a lot of this already. This last section is just summed up actionable advice, and we've been weaving it throughout the entire podcast. So I know people are going to get a good dose of it no matter which sections they listen to. But I want to talk about something that is critical, I think, to normal adult function, which is how do you partition your time, like balance your work and your life?
Yeah. I think as much as like I've tried not to schedule things, I think it really helps me to like actually compartmentalize, like going back to what I said, like what do I want to do and where am I going to carve out time for it, right? Because we can say like, oh yeah, my hobbies are this, or I really like, helping the community, or I really like, doing whatever. But like, for example, I was recently talking to friends and, they were asking like, oh, what are your hobbies? And I'm like, I like hiking, I guess, but I haven't hiked in 6 months. Like, it's like, is that really something that's valuable to me then? If I mean, it is when I do it, but I don't carve out time to do it.
Right.
So I think, sorry, what was the question again?
It was, how do you partition your time?
Oh, partition your time. Yeah, not very well, but I wish, like outside of like working hours, my time it's fun to be free flowing sometimes, but also like, for example, when you messaged me like, oh, like, do you want to be on this interview or whatnot? I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Like, that sounds awesome. That's something that I want to do. And literally like, I just blocked off time and like, that's when I did it. Right. Cause it was exciting for me. Right. It's something that the moment you sent me that message, I was like, yes, this is exciting.
You had a hard yes.
Yes, exactly. It was a hard yes. And there's other, times when things will come up in my life that it's like, it's kind of a yes. Like I received a request recently to do a talk at a school, to kind of like plug D4X. And I was like, yes, I would love to do that. But at the same time, like I don't have the bandwidth for it because I would have to do it during working hours. And like I just started a new job and like I don't want to take time off to do that. And like, I was like, well, how do I work around like, there's this request and like, again, just breaking it down to basic fundamentals, like what do they want, right? The school wants a better sense of like what the program is. And it's like, oh, okay, well, could they like just, could I achieve the same thing just by like sending them a quick little video of me talking? Could they like watch this video that's on our website? Could they like, could I give them a phone number of one of our students and like have them explain it to them, right? So I think, being very cognizant that like there are so many things I want to do in my life, and all of us have things that we want to do in our life, but it is physically impossible to do all of them. Right? And so we do have to decide, like, do I do this now or 5 years from now? If I even make it 5 years from now, like what's important right now? And then just like literally carve out time and do it.
Interesting. Yeah. So I love that, carving out time to things you're really excited about. And then also what I heard in there, if I can abstract what you did, it was you hear what they want, you find out what their goal is, and you weigh out the pros and cons of doing it the way they described, and you see, okay, that's not going to fit with my tolerance for moving my workday around.
Right.
Right. Like I can't do that. It's a non-starter for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But maybe I can get them what they want through another mean. And so you search for alternatives.
Right.
Right. That you then do the same thing. You weigh out the pros and the cons and you see, oh, well, an email would work.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to do that. So there's some quick processing advice for people who might struggle prioritizing and partitioning their time. So I want to move into another really interesting, what I think is a really interesting question, which is how do you challenge your beliefs or develop new perspectives?
Ooh, I like to say I like trying everything at least once. So, like, for example, when I was in China once a couple of years ago, I was like at a restaurant and the vendor was like, oh, like, what do you want to eat? And I'm like, give me the most weird, baffling thing on the menu. So they brought out like fried bees and like, just the pork brain and like everything. And I was like, this is weird and I've never done this before, but screw it. Like, let's go. And like I had it and I was like, oh, that actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Actually, I really liked the fried bees. Like this is actually really good.
Okay.
So I think just like being very open to new things. And like I said, like I like trying things at least once. Like there are things in my life where it's like, I know I like this, let me keep doing this. But at the same time, if I only do the things that I like for sure, and I don't insert and inject new things into my life, like it's going to be a very boring life. Right. So, whether that's like, trying new foods or like hanging out with people that like have completely different views. Like, I recently, had a friend group of, I won't explain too much about them, but like, they came from very, very, very wealthy families, in China. And, just getting a sense of like what's important to them, what matters to them, what the things that they did, why they did them, and, how they're different from what's important to me. Right. And, it was a very eye-opening experience for me to be like, oh, wow. Like, I used to think that this group of people did this because of this, but actually it's because of this. Right. And so now I get this new perspective of like, okay, like don't make assumptions about it. Like really, like when you get to know people, like I love asking people, like kind of like you're doing now with this podcast, like what was your journey? Like, how did you get here? Like, cause you learn so much more about a person through like what their journey was and how they shaped it versus just like, yeah, you're a software engineer at Facebook. Oh, automatically, like, yeah, like you must have come from this background, like you did this. But really, like it's often not the case. It's like you uncover so much more by learning about that journey. So I think for me, I love just meeting new people, like completely different from me. And when I was at Stanford, actually, I regret spending so much time with people like me from my background, from my ethnic background, socioeconomic background, because I didn't really get exposed to like all of the different perspectives out there. And I think, going back to the question about inspiration, now that I've thought about it more, I think that's where I get my inspiration from, like just meeting new people, doing things that like that Michelin rated restaurant. I would never have done it, but I'm just like, you know what? Let me do it at least once with this friend and I'll learn about it. I'll learn like, oh, now I understand why he likes this experience for much. Is it for me? No, but now I have a good sense of like why it matters to him.
Yeah. You put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
Cool. That I think is really powerful stuff. I think many of us have a habit of sitting in our comfort zones when it comes to competing ideas, especially those that might challenge like core beliefs that we hold or assumptions that we hold, right? Because we kind of like, our ego likes being right.
Yeah.
And it hurts when it's wrong. But I want to offer something that preserves the ego's desire to be right and lets you do this, in that doing that is also right, because you get to become more right afterward, because you get to see it for what it is rather than living off an assumption. So you can have your cake and eat it too with this one.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're nearing our end here. We have 2 more questions, so prepare yourself. I want to ask you, what advice would you like to offer any of our younger audience? Maybe people who are just beginning their careers or their search to find themselves.
Okay. Ooh, okay. My biggest piece of advice is just talk to the people that you think you can't get a hold of. So an example of this. So recently, actually, let me give you a little background story. So like I mentioned, my high school was funded in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it was really interesting how it kind of came full circle because I eventually worked at Microsoft. And so one day at Microsoft, I literally emailed Satya Nadella, like CEO of Microsoft. And I mean, I spilled my whole story into this email about like, exactly what I described here. Like, the school I went to, the family I came from, then got into Stanford and now work at Microsoft at your company. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is incredible. And I didn't even expect him to respond back to me. I was just like, I'm just going to do it because why not? And he actually responded back to me literally within like, I think it was like 20 minutes or something, like something insane. And I was just like, holy shit. Like Satya Nadella, like actually carved out 30 seconds of his time to respond to me. And then after that, I was going to a conference for philanthropy. This is when I was starting D4X in San Francisco. And what was his name? But the president of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he was there, and I didn't know that he was going to be there until he like introduced himself, and like I was sitting in the front row, and I was just like, oh my God, like this guy like works for the foundation that literally changed my life. And like at the end of a session where they're like, oh, does anyone have any questions? I just shot up, like I didn't even like raise my hand. I like literally jumped out of my chair and it was like me, and like I again just like spilled my story, and he was just like, you could tell like this guy was just like, oh my God, like this is incredible. Like I get to meet one of the people who like my foundation impacts. And I kept in touch with him. And then I knew that Melinda Gates was actually going to be at Stanford. Again, this is way after I graduated for a talk. And I knew that one of my friends at Stanford at the time was moderating that talk. So I sent her a message and I was like, is there any way that I could possibly like meet Melinda Gates? And I asked the president of the foundation too. And, both of them were like, no, like she's going to be really busy and whatnot. So probably not. But if you want to like, send her like a physical thank you card or something like, and give it to us, like we can give that to her. So I did that. And then, I went to her talk and then, I saw her go backstage and everything. And it's like, oh, okay, well, didn't get to meet her, but at least I know that my friend like gave her the thank you card. And then, I literally walked out of the auditorium and I was like, no, Josh, you did not get this far to not at least say hi to her. And it was like this weird, like fate, guardian angel, voice in my head kind of a thing. And like, I turned around and I bumped into one of my friends and he's like, oh, like I'm going to go, I want to talk to like Melinda Gates and like, let's figure out how to like, get a hold of her. Mm-hmm. So we both went backstage and then, of course the security guard's like, no, like you can't talk to her. Like, she's busy or, whatnot. But my friend who was moderating the panel, she was like, no, I really do think you should let him go and talk to her. And so I walk up to Melinda Gates and I'm like, hi, I'm Joshua Mendoza. And she's like, oh, you're Joshua Mendoza. Like, it's such a pleasure to meet you. And she was like, and I was just like, she knows my name. Like, this is incredible because she had gotten the thank you card. And then literally last weekend, someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, oh, congratulations for being featured in, their 2020 video or whatever. And I'm like, what video? I was featured on it. And the note card that I gave her actually was in that video. And she was talking about like, oh, when some of our scholars, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God. Right. And, it's so, going back to your audience, like I never in a million years would have dreamed like being able to like meet Melinda Gates, like, meet this figurehead that literally changed my life. And not just that, but like, her knowing about me beforehand, because I just put myself out there and I was like, I deserve to be known. I deserve to be heard. And like, I think that my story will bring value again, going back to the idea of like bringing value, like I want you to know how much you changed my life in a very positive way. So yeah, I think for your audience, like find a way to contact the people that like seem to be impossible to get a hold of. But if they're like, your heroes or whatnot, like you will find a way, right? And there's, that was one scenario, but there've been so many like CEOs and people that like are really inspirational for me that like, God knows how, like I've managed to do it, but like I found a way to like just get a hold of them and talk to them and thank them. And I think again, going back to the idea of like, I'm very genuine, right? Like I don't approach these people, these CEOs and like, oh, like, can you help me with this? Or can you do this for me? I'm just like, thank you. Like really thank you. 'Cause you changed my life. And even like 2-3 years after, I still won't ask for anything, but I'll still update them like, oh, I'm now at this job, or now I'm here, oh, thank you again so much, because that one thing that you told me when we met, like I did something with it, right? So again, just like try to reach those people that inspire you, that really motivate you, and because it's scary, but just do it.
Awesome, great advice. If I were to sum that up, maybe things aren't as far out of your reach as you think.
Yeah. For sure.
And go for it. And now to the final question. are there any causes or projects that you want to bring to our audience's attention?
So there's this little thing called Destined for X. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. I guess I've done enough plugs about, D4X, but I think, if anyone in your audience is interested in helping underserved or underprivileged high school students who want to venture into tech or business, definitely reach out. Our website is destinedforx.com. If people want to be a mentor or a volunteer, or if people are more interested in helping out longer term, being like an exec member, and being a part of our team, and in terms of like getting programming, curriculum, helping us get grants and whatnot, always highly appreciated. And they're again going with the theme of like sometimes it's the little things that matter, right? Like you might think like, oh, like if I donate like a little bit of money here, or if I spend an hour of my time helping this cause or this project, like is it really doing that much? But I mean it does, right? And one thing I highlight at our banquet every year is and like when you came, and I remember like you brought like a little box of strawberries, and like it was just like the most amazing thing. Like it's like I love strawberries, right? And so like every little contribution, like every single person brings something, right? No one person can bring everything to the table. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing when, if anyone in your audience wants to do like even the littlest thing, like it'll go a long way. So that's a cause I'm personally, obviously very invested in. But I think, just in general, like find ways to give back. And, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to start your own nonprofit. Like give a little bit of money here, donate, your time here. And it makes a difference. It really does.
Good to hear. That's really good to hear. So, everyone can make a difference.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm walking away from this full of admiration and inspiration. And I hope the same is translated to the audience. So I want to thank you so much for coming on. Again, if you want to reach out, destinedforx.com would be the best way.
So if you want to get involved with us, yes, destinedforx.com, and there's a volunteer tab. And you can just shoot us a message there. Also for your audience, and I hope your audience is not like those 5 high school kids, in that one auditorium. Like literally, like I will try my best to answer any questions that your audience has. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think it's like linkedin.com/in/Josh Mendoza 1, if I'm not mistaken. And you can just feel free to message me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Yeah. But I love helping people. Sometimes it's very hard for me to do just because there's so many, like a billion things like everyone that I've got to do. But I always try to make time to help people and answer their questions.
Beautiful. Well, we'll throw those links in the description as well. And once again, thank you for coming on, Josh.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Derek. It's been so much fun.